and then allow the colleagues then to come in to introduce themselves, and then we'll start with the swearing in or affirmation of the witnesses.
There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, and members of the Commission, and everyone around. It's an absolute pleasure for us to be here, and thank you for inviting us. My name is Doris Tsepe. I'm the Commissioner of the Competition Commission of South Africa. I am joined by the team chair, and the team consists, to my left is Mr. Andile Gwabeni. Mr. Andile Gwabeni is the divisional manager in the office of the commissioner. And to my right is the chief economist of the Competition Commission, Mr. James Hodge, who also acts as the deputy commissioner. The other team members, chair, includes Kali Rendwe, Rene Nyeni, I think she's joining online, and Raksha Darji, and both of them are principal economists in the Economic and Research Bureau of the Commission. And then we have a senior economist, Mr. Kagiso Zwane, and an economist, Ms. Andiswa Sibukwana. This is who constitute the team. I will make the presentation, Chair, and then the team will come and when there are questions and answer, you will see that the work we do is very spread, and that's why we would have brought all the team members so that we're able to answer to the questions you may have as we go along. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Tepe. I just want to start with yourself so we can just administrate oath to the whole team as well as those online. So we'll just start with you. If you can just kindly stand for this moment. Full names for the record once more.
Doris Lebohang Johanna Tsepe.
Will you be taking the prescribed oath or affirmation?
Oath.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth, nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Can we have the next official? Full names for the record.
Mr. Andile Gwabeni.
Mr. Gwabeni, will you be taking the prescribed oath or affirmation?
Oath.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you say that the evidence you are about to present before the commission is the truth, nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Next official.
My name is James William Hodge.
So, Mr. Hodge, will you be taking the oath or the affirmation?
Affirmation.
Do you consider the affirmation to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "I affirm."
I affirm.
Can we have the next colleague coming in?
Ubusiso Kagiso Welile Zwane,
Mr. Zwane, will you be taking the oath or the affirmation?
the affirmation.
Do you consider the affirmation to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "I affirm."
I affirm.
Thank you. The next colleague.
Andiswa Sibukwana.
Andiswa, say?
Sibukwana.
Sibukwana.
Yes.
Ma'am, will you be taking the oath or the affirmation?
The oath.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. The next colleague.
Raksha Dilip Darji.
Surname just one more time.
Darji.
Daji. Will you be taking the oath or the affirmation?
The oath.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you say that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
We're going to go to the online colleagues. If we can just assist by spotlighting them.
I don't think she's the chair. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. We will proceed with those who are here. And once she is, they just notify us. And then we will either swear her in or alternatively, she can just listen in, given the fact that maybe the other colleagues will be able to answer. Just a reminder that you have 20 minutes, Lindo, 20 minutes for the presentation. And thereafter, the evidence leaders will lead you through the questions. Thank you.
Is the chair, will the presentation be flighted?
Lindo, is the presentation available to be flighted? Oh, thank you so much.
I'm just not seeing it, so is it? Oh, it should be. Oh, all right. Okay, thank you. Y- y- Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. Chair, just to note that the branch that is responsible for the Competition Commission, being the Transformation and Competition branch of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, is online. I know the head, Dr. Mangole, is online, and she also is supporting us. Chair, given the time, what we tried to do with the presentation was to cover the questions that have been asked, but in a way that introduces the Competition Commission to the inquiry, but also what our mandate is and why this area is also an area of priority for the Competition Commission, and what has been the interventions that the Commission has done in here, and then where to from here. So that's the outline more broadly, Chair, in relation to what we will be what we will be telling you about. I won't go much into this, Chair, because I know you know that the Competition Commission is established in terms of the Competition Act. It's one of the 3 statutory bodies constituted in terms of the Act, the others being the Competition Tribunal and the Competition Appeal Court. The Commission is essentially the investigative and prosecutorial arm of the 3 bodies, with the Tribunal being the adjudicative arm and the Competition Appeal Court being the appellate body of the 3. The Commission investigates complaints, it assesses measures, evaluates exemption application, and undertakes market inquiry and advocacy work, and this it does in order to achieve equity and efficiency in the South African market. The Act then specify what the purpose of the Act is, and you will see there that it is about promoting efficiency, adaptability, and development of the economy, and to provide consumers, and I think that's one of the areas that is important here, with competitive pricing and product choice, and to ensure that SMEs have an equitable opportunity to participate in the economy and to promote a greater spread of ownership, and in particular, to increase the ownership stakes of historically disadvantaged persons. Chair, the mandate of the Commission is set out in the Act, but I think it's important to reference the preamble, because what the preamble does of the Act is to remind us why we have this Act and what it's seeking to do, and that is to deal with the historical practices that has meant that we have an excessive concentration of ownership and control within the economy, inadequate constraint against anti-competitive trade practices, and unjust restriction on full and free participation in the economy by all South Africans. So the aim of this Act is to try and deal with some of those. One of the questions that we were asked was about the constitutional framework. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that like any other law, and the Constitutional Court reminded us, Chief Justice then Mogoeng in the case of Mediclinic, that the court emphasized that Section 39(2) of the Constitution requires all courts, including those enforcing the Competition Act, to interpret the law in a manner which promotes the spirit, purport and objects of the Bill of Rights, and noted that the Competition Tribunal and the Competition Appeal Court have an added responsibility to do so, as that has been imposed on them by the preamble of the Act and its purpose. So I think that's, that question, Chair, it has been something that the courts have made clear, that there is a constitutional framework within which we view the Act. Like any statutory body funded through taxpayers' money, we have to prioritize in the work that we do, because funds would be limited. And how we've set to do that as the Commission is we strive to maximize the impact of our work through a prioritization framework to direct resources to priority sectors and particular issues, particularly those that affect low-income consumers. And when we set this prioritization framework, we take into account government priorities and existence of competition issues in those areas. Our priorities obviously take into account priorities that have been set out by the 7th administration, and that is reduce the cost of living, particularly for low-income consumers, reduce the cost of doing business, particularly critical inputs, energy, logistics, and digital, reduce concentration and promote competitiveness for growth and job creation by removing barriers to entry and expansion, particularly scaling challenges and accessing new markets. And lastly, to increase economic inclusion through promoting the participation of SMEs and historically disadvantaged persons. The priority sectors here, they are in, we take into account obviously the priority sectors that government has identified, and that is agriculture, mining, manufacturing, tourism, digital services, and green industries. From a Commission point of view, what we then do is we look at those that will affect our mandate. And for purposes of this, that we have agriculture, and that includes food value chains and agro-processing, industrial sectors, which includes manufacturing, digital markets, healthcare, and retail. Those are the 5 sectors that we have prioritized for the work that we do. Why agriculture, Chair? As we know, it's one of South Africa's key contributors to economic growth and employment. It contributes approximately 2.6% to the country's GDP. The sector impact on the economy is further amplified by linkages with other economic sectors. As such, the market features of the agriculture and food value chains have important implications for food security, economic stability, and household well-being. We have been focusing in this area on the drivers of food prices, cost transmission along the food value chains, barriers to entry, expansion, and participation by SMEs and HDP, and ensuring that competition is to the benefit of all South Africans. Using the tools that we have in terms of the Act, we have looked at a combination of most of them, Chair, as a mechanism to achieve our objectives. And most of those in both the agricultural sector and food value chain. At the very beginning, Chair, is the research and monitoring initiatives, and I'm going to come into that later on, is that we use knowledge of the priority sector to identify and explore impactful areas that may suffer competition concerns. And here you will hear us speaking a little bit on the essential food price monitoring reports, which have since later become the cost of living reports, the concentration tracker, the 2021 one, and research work that we do for case initiation. And that is part of what we look at as we go into case investigation for our enforcement work. So the research work help us to then identify areas over and above complaints that we receive, proactive areas where we can look to investigate and deal and prosecute firm conduct, whether it's unilateral or collective, that will be contravening the Act, and that way we look to increase market competitiveness. Some of the examples, and you would have heard about them sometime today, of the work that we have done is in cartel conduct, where we have been looking at areas, particularly those areas that affect low-income consumers. Bread cartel was one of the biggest cartels that we prosecuted. The milling cartel, including flour and maize mill. We have intervened in edible oils, and we have looked at inputs as well through fertilizer cases. We have also looked at poultry and other areas, broadly even in abuse cases, Chair. Through measure control, we ensure that measure transactions do not lead to substantial prevention or lessening of competition or raise significant public interest concern, in turn preventing anti-competitive structures in the economy. So that's one of the areas that we've been dealing with. We have set out some of the cases that, some of the measures that we've dealt with in this area. I'm going to speak about market inquiries later on that we have dealt with in this area. And essentially what market inquiries are, Chair, they are a formal inquiry that looks at the general state of competition, and this includes level of concentration in the structure of a market, allowing for the Commission to identify if there are any market feature or features that impede, restrict, or distort competition in that particular market. And as I said, the grocery retail market inquiry, the fresh produce market inquiry, which was completed last year, and is soon to be taken on market inquiry into poultry. You will see, Chair, and we'll talk a little bit later on, that sometimes some conduct, and when we talk about essential food price monitoring, you will see that advocacy, meaning soft law, becomes a critical intervention, because in some instances the conduct may not be conduct that contravenes the law, and so you may not be able to bring an excessive pricing case against high pricing, for example. But advocacy work that we do becomes quite critical, highlighting that work and making sure that we put pressure to ensure that that work, that kind of conduct does not continue, although it may not necessarily be a contravention of excessive pricing, for example, provision in the Act, but it may still be harmful to consumers. And so we try and deal with it in that way through our advocacy work, and we'll speak about that a little bit. Chair, I'm now coming to the food pricing, inflation, and crisis response, and this is the work that we've been doing on essential food price monitoring. And why food price monitoring Chair, if you look, I don't have one of those fancy things that shows you. So decile 1 relates more to poorest household. I'm not even sure you're able to see the distinction there, but that's in that area there you would see it's where there is 11%, and then I think the decile 10 is where you have 6%. And what that graph indicates, Chair, is that the poorest household are the most vulnerable to food inflation. And if you look at the next graph onto your right, you'll see that in the recent inflationary episode, food prices increased by more than the overall prices. And so when you see that, it means in this inflationary increase episode, the poorest household are the most affected. That's what those two slides seek to show, Chair. And Chair, if there are any questions, the economists in the room are available to help me to deal with those questions. Chair, and then what we did in July 2020, Chair, you'll recall this was during COVID. The Commission started implementing ongoing price monitoring initiative to track price movements, markups, and profitability in key food value chains. And this was introduced as a result, as I said, of the COVID pandemic. And here you had concerns about food price inflation and affordability, particularly for the low-income consumers. And we saw prices of essential food, including garlic and some of the things that we required at the time, quite frankly, increasing at amazing time. The analysis found instances where retail prices of staple foods, including bread and maize, increased faster than producer prices, raising concerns about whether price increases were cost effective. Monitoring also examined supply side disruptions, including droughts affecting grain markets, the avian flu outbreaks impacting poultry supply. So as a result of this monitoring, we then introduce what we call the Essential Food Price Monitoring Report in 2020. We have published it every 6 months since 2022. The last one we published was last year in September 2025, which we've since called a cost of living report. And that's because we wanted to expand not just food, but to include broader household expenses. And you will see the new one that will be coming. We are looking at utilities as in electricity or energy costs and water costs, and it will be coming soon. These frameworks provide evidence on pricing trends, price spreads, and market behavior, supporting Commission's enforcement and advocacy function. And as I said, Chair, earlier, this is a soft law and advocacy approach that we use to publicize problematic short-term increases that our law cannot deal with. And this has worked. I mean, one of the examples in one of the essential food price monitoring report we issued was on the cooking oil value chain, where we saw increases in the cooking oil, and it was supposed to be as a result of the Ukraine war, and it turned out that in fact those supply chains were not affecting our production here. And once we published that, we saw some prices in fact coming down, either through discounts or other mechanism. But that is the difficulty we have in this kind of work. And so continuing in this monitoring and publishing this report helps to highlight those kind of difficulties. I've said, Chair, that in September 2025, we expanded the monitoring framework and we introduced what we call the cost of living report. It still retains the food price monitoring, which was done through the Essential Food Price Monitoring Report, but the scope has expanded to include electricity, water, transport, fuel, education, and healthcare. This broader approach reflects the view that consumer affordability pressures arise from cumulative cost increases, not just from fruit price. The approach here is to continue to assess price spreads and price transmission across food value chains. Findings are analyzed within the context of inflation trends and broader economic condition. What we've also found on essential food items is that pricing trends observed in some food markets, such as maize meal, chicken, eggs, still raise some concern. Here, Chair, due to the problem with time, we wanted to show you some of the graphs on eggs, on chicken, but we've decided to just deal with maize, which is a very important staple food for most household. And here what we've seen is that production costs have declined due to improved domestic harvest. And so you've seen an increased supply. White maize prices decreased in May from 22 Rand to 14 Rand. Producer prices have not adjusted downwards to some extent. And in some months, we've even seen the increase. And that has meant the margins are increasing, and you'll see the growth in the margin, Chair, on that graph. And the same thing is still the case even at a retail level, Chair. Price of maize meal was on the upward trajectory for the first half of 2025, and although prices are decreasing, the margin at retail level are still high, sitting at about 37% in November 2025. So this is still a concerning trend, and that's why we continue to monitor it, Chair. Then I move, Chair, I hope I'm moving fast enough, Chair. I now move to the next segment, and that is market concentration in food value chain. The Commission published a market concentration tracker. The last one that was published was in 2021. So the figures you're seeing on the slide there, Chair, is of the 2021 tracker. We are updating our concentration report. One will be finalized and published at the end of this financial year, meaning end of March. And the aim here was to understand concentration levels and participation in the economy. And I think, Chair, what you can see is that the inputs and processing parts of the food value chain are the most highly concentrated across value chains. And so that's the one thing I just wanted to highlight there. We have then sought, as I said, through market inquiries to engage in this. 3 market inquiries in the sector. One was concluded in 2019. It was the grocery retail market inquiry, and it looked at the grocery retail sector, found that it is highly concentrated. Top 5 retailers held approximately 64% of the market share. There were significant buyer power held by the national supermarket. We did here, Chair, and with agreement with most of the retailers, the removal of exclusive long-term leases that we found in shopping malls, which effectively foreclosed challenger retailers and specialist stores. And the effect of this was to restrict consumer choice, reduce diversity of available food providers. But this, what it has done now is it has opened up this market so that these market participants who were not allowed now have ability to get into this. There were many other recommendations that were made in this market inquiry, that we continue to monitor and make sure that, that they are being implemented. The next one is the fresh produce market inquiry. And what this did was to look at the fresh produce value chain. It concentrated on those fresh produce that are highly consumed in the country, found high level of concentration happening at an input level, Chair, and the effect is that you have high production costs, which are then passed on to consumers. At a retail level, there are high supply chain costs that also still are passed to consumers. The poultry market inquiry is still to start, Chair, and we have publicized the final terms of reference, meaning it has now been initiated and the hearings should commence anytime soon, Chair. I'm moving fast, Chair, and I'm very sorry about that. Then the next area, Chair, is the inclusion of small-scale and informal food processors. And we have had several advocacy interventions aimed at increasing participation by SMEs and HDP firms in agriculture and food value chain. One of those we do through advocacy of major remedies. Chair, may I say that the gentleman who's just arrived, Mr. Hardin Rachisusu, although he is here, I think, representing the National Consumer Commission, he is also the Deputy Commissioner of the Competition Commission and in fact chaired the Fresh Produce Market Inquiry. So all questions relating to the Fresh Produce Market Inquiry, I'm sure he will be very happy to assist the inquiry with regard to the chair. I'm very happy he has since joined us. Chair, as you know that when we assess measures, we also look, one of the factors that we look at is the effect of measure on small and medium enterprises and firms that are owned, controlled by HDP firms. And so where there are effects, we then have to impose remedies that may cause the harm. And through that work, we've had several measures where we have included development funds, a remedy targeting firms in the food and agriculture value chain, and we have conducted an impact assessment in respect of those funds and found that these studies have supported access to finance and markets for these beneficiaries, and that a study was conducted by the Advocacy Division of the Commission looking at all these funds that had been established. We have also used advocacy work to go into the milk industry. And here, Chair, we were looking at buyer power provisions, which are provisions that were introduced in the amendments to the 2019 amendments of the Competition Act. And what we were seeing is we are not receiving a lot of complaints with this provision. And we think it's because of the power imbalances that are happening where suppliers would be affected by how, or scared, I would, if I may use that word, to lay complaints because that may affect their suppliers' relationship with the big and dominant buyers. So we then used our advocacy role to go into various sectors where we think that could be a concern and explain to them the provision of the Act and how they can in fact lay complaints, and that included suppliers, I think, in the Western Cape and in Gauteng on awareness of these provisions and to deal with these challenges. As I said, Chair, following the finalization of the Fresh Produce Market Inquiry, we also made some recommendation and imposed remedial action to various stakeholders to address challenges that are faced by small and medium enterprises and HDP farmers and in the fresh produce value chain. we found that lack of access to municipal-owned national fresh produce markets, a key route to market, was being worsened by inconsistent municipal bylaws. So we then make a recommendation to municipalities to introduce measures to deal with their bylaws, to harmonize them, and we've given them a time period to do so. There has been delays from a funding point of view in implementation of blended finance schemes and finalization of water licenses. We've made recommendation to ensure that these are happening, and they're happening fast. Chair, another area of concern has been that HDP market agents, and I think Mr. Rachisusi can speak more on this, is that market agent as a route to market for farmers is a very key relationship for farmers. But we are seeing that HDP market agents are struggling to obtain large volume of fresh produce due to long-standing relationship between established farmers and preferred agents. And we've now put up remedial actions to make sure that HDP market agents are being introduced. And we have seen, in fact, Mr. Rachisusi can speak to that, that in fact some of the large market agents have taken onto these remedial actions and are starting on this project. We also saw that there was a lack of meaningful entry of SME fresh produce retailers into shopping markets, and we have sought to make recommendations in that regard. Chair, I will then go to the last area, which is governance, coordination, and reform commitment. Our law empowers us to enter into memorandum of understanding with other regulatory authorities to ensure consistent application of competition principles in regulated sectors, and we have done this. Chair, we have entered into an MOU even with the Department of Agriculture to collaborate on studies assessing the link between competition and food security. We continue to monitor and make comments on proposed regulation and legislation by government to ensure that they align with competition principles and framework. One of the studies that the Commission is conducting, which is a joint project with the Department of Agriculture, and it's due to be completed now at the end of March, is called the Food Security Study, and it seeks to analyze value chain of zero-rated essential foods like bread, maize meal, and poultry. This will develop recommendation for the Commission and government on inclusion in value chains and potential areas of competition policy action, and we may see some competition intervention following from this, but we will do so at that time. I've already spoken about areas where we make submissions through our advocacy division on some policies, and we have one of those is submissions that we made to the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment on policies to reduce barriers to entry for SMEs and historically disadvantaged persons on licensing, fishery licensing, and we've then made proposal on how this could be done. We have, as I said, Chair, made reform submissions to the Department of Water and Sanitation on fast-tracking of licensing, water licensing, to allow for agriculture activities, particularly by small farmers, and accelerate the implementation of blended finance. We've made a number of recommendations to government to facilitate competitiveness and support package for SMEs through the grocery retail market inquiry and the fresh produce market inquiry. So, Chair, in conclusion, I know I have run through this.
Sorry, Commissioners. We are going to give you an extra 10 minutes so that you can breathe and perhaps slow down, 'cause We have a bit of time now. We advise that one of our presenters is not going to make it today, so you have 10 more minutes, so you can now take a bit of time.
Chair, I really appreciate it. I felt like I was not breathing as I was speaking. I thought I was very quick. But Chair, I will conclude anyway, but in the conclusion, I will amplify a little bit. I know most of the slides I was speaking mostly to the work that we're doing in South Africa, but I thought it's important also to talk about our collaborative work that we having both regionally and internationally. The Competition Commission of South Africa is co-chairing together with the Competition Authority of Kenya a special project on food and agricultural markets in the International Competition Network. This is the network of all competition authorities globally, and this is a special project that the steering group of the network has decided is a very important area on food value chains. We have developed a toolkit on price monitoring and advocacy reforms in food markets, which we will be presenting at the annual conference that will be happening in May this year. And this is taking into account all the monitoring work, the pricing monitoring work that we have been doing, that others elsewhere globally have been doing, and what the best practices are, and what sort of outcomes we can see out of that. And Kenya and South Africa are running with that. We are a member of the working group of the BRICS competition authorities, and we do research in agriculture and food markets, looking at global grain trade. We are also a member of the African Competition Forum, and we co-chair the working group on research in agriculture and food markets, also looking at global grain trade. And this is important because as you will see, commodity trade continues to form part of our work, because it is essential to many essential products and their pricing that has an impact in the country and in the economy. So, Chair, I think we, as an authority, we remain deeply committed to supporting a pro-competitive market developments in food and agricultural markets. We continue tracking the prices of essential food throughout the value chain, and use soft law to deal with the harm that may arise there, which may, as I said, not necessarily be excessive pricing, but may harm consumers, and will use advocacy work to do so. The joint work with the Department of Agriculture is likely to result in some initiation into some of the essential food sectors, and we'll see once that is submitted. We seek to support the removal of barriers to alternative agricultural system, as the large-scale commercial model is subject to all price shocks affecting chemical fertilizers and logistic costs. And we're seeing with the current geopolitical crisis that are happening now, that this is having an impact as we speak on us now. We also support increased resilience from climate change and other shocks that we have experienced in the last 5 years. And as I said, Chair, we will continue our work on commodity trade, as many essential products are impacted by global commodity markets and traders. So thank you, Chair. I think I will end here. And if there are any comments, Chair, any questions, the team is here to answer to those. I hope and the team can inform me if I've covered all the issues that I was required to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'm going to hand over to the evidence leaders.
Thank you. Before I start, I have a procedural matter for the commissioners. We didn't receive the written submission. What we have is an annex to the submission of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. But it seems from the presentation that the Competition Commission did receive a letter independently of the one that was sent to the Minister with specific questions addressed to the Competition Commission. So if that's the case, then I'm wondering if we shouldn't request that the material presented here is reformatted and put into a formal submission, which we don't at the moment have.
Thank you so much. Commissioner, is it possible if you can convert the presentation into written submissions and then email it to the Commission using the food inquiry email as well as the other emails that you've sent to the Commission?
Chair, just so I clarify, we made the submission through the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, which is the annexure. So that annexure is the submission by the Competition Commission following a request from the department to do so. At the time, we had not received the letter from the Human Rights Commission. So we then submitted it as a joint submission with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. But we're happy for the same annexure, Chair, to be the submission of the Competition Commission. So we have done that. That's the work that the Commission has submitted. So that annexure is the submission of the Competition Commission. It's the one we use to prepare the presentation, Chair.
May I ask, Commissioner, is it in line with the letter that you subsequently received in terms of the specific questions that were addressed to yourselves?
I think the questions, so what we did with regards to the letter from the department was to respond to the questions that affected the Competition Commission, because the letter had specific issues relating to the Competition Commission, and we've covered all. But if the evidence leaders feel that there were some parts on the annexure that do not, I don't think it should be a problem for us to add those, and they can indicate which parts we have not dealt with, and we can then deal with it. Just as a procedure, we would have no problem doing so, Chair.
Prof, can I ask you, perhaps let's have a question session, and thereafter you will then identify which further aspects you'd like. Then we'd ask the colleagues from the Commission to provide us within what we recall as supplementary submissions based on the interaction they would have with you.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your presentation and presenting on the range of work that you do. It's not surprising you need it all the time. It's quite clear that the Competition Commission plays a vital role in regulating the behavior of powerful actors in the food system in South Africa. And in my opinion, the Competition Commission is therefore one of the most important witnesses in this inquiry. According to your website, the purpose of the Competition Commission is, quote, to investigate, control and evaluate restrictive business practices, abuse of dominant positions and mergers in order to achieve equity and efficiency in the South African economy. So the first question is, as a government agency that's active in regulating the food system, does the Competition Commission see itself as one of the duty bearers for the right to food?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. I do think that the Commission has a role to play as mandated in the Competition Act. So to the extent that the conduct of market participants has a bearing on competition, then the Competition Commission, within its mandate, has a role to play. So I don't think, and I think we have made it clear, Chair, that we regard food value chain as one of the priority sectors where we play a role in making sure within our mandate that we play that role. Thank you, Chair. I don't know, Andile or James, if you want to add.
Okay, I want to move on to the specific report that you mentioned in your presentation, the Grocery Retail Market Inquiry Report, because it's a significant one for this inquiry. It made strong adverse findings against supermarket chains, and it recommended a number of remedial actions in the report. And you mentioned that you are monitoring compliance with those actions. So one example that you spoke about was that national supermarket chains must with immediate effect cease from enforcing exclusivity provisions in their lease agreements against other grocery retailers. So my question is, how many of these remedial actions have actually been implemented, either fully or in part, since you are monitoring compliance, and it's several years later now? So how many of them have been implemented?
I'll hand over to James to answer that.
Maybe just to start with some context. So the Grocery Retail Market Inquiry was done under the Act before it was amended in 2019, and at the time we had no powers to actually impose remedial actions. Those powers have now come, and so the fresh produce had those powers for it. But the most important part was the exclusivity that you've mentioned. So we entered into basically settlement agreements with ShopRite Checkers Group, Pick n Pay, and Spar, which were the three that did impose those. And we had an immediate cessation of exclusivity being enforced against small business or black-owned businesses. And then in terms of exclusivity against each other, there was a phase-out approach adopted that will be complete at the end of this calendar year in 2026. So from that perspective, that is being implemented. There were some other recommendations around, for instance, more transparent access for small businesses to shopping malls. Unfortunately, we went into COVID, and as you'll remember, the shopping malls hit a complete crisis. And so that is something we're picking up again now, along with also the supplier codes. In terms of government recommendations, it is a more tricky area. We can only make recommendations to government. We can't impose anything. But also a lot of it is at a municipal level, which is difficult to coordinate. So we have seen some of the provinces like Gauteng, KZN, picking up on some of these proposals around, for instance, additional distribution points to help spaza shops to access cheaper warehousing. And we are again looking to reinvigorate that effort in order to sort of bring more action on that front going forward.
Okay. I want to dig deeper into this issue of how much power the Competition Commission actually has. So you make recommendations for remedial actions in most of your reports when you identify some kind of abuse of power, for example. So my question is, to what extent are your recommendations advisory only, or are they legally binding on anybody, either that's corporate, for example, or for government to enforce that? Are they justiciable findings, recommendations? What are the limits of the powers that you have?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I think James made a very important distinction about, and I'm assuming we're still speaking on market inquiries. On market inquiries, prior to the amendment in 2019, the power we had from market inquiries was to make recommendations. And so those would be recommendations to be implemented for everyone. It wasn't just for government. With the amendments in 2019, we now have the power to make remedial actions against those who we make findings against. and those are binding remedial action. I hasten to say, and Mr. Rachisusu could speak on this, we have there's a challenge to one of the remedial action we have made in the fresh produce market inquiry, and that is going through the courts at the moment, and we will find out from what the courts say of what the actual extent of that remedial action is. So currently the remedial actions are binding. The parties have a right to appeal against those remedial action through the tribunal or the competition appeal court. Some have been going through the High Court. So in respect of those are binding. Then in respect of government, we can only make recommendation in respect of those.
And that's very helpful, thank you. Would you agree that the food system in South Africa displays frequent abuses of power, including profiteering through price fixing, price gouging, and failing to pass on falls in producer prices to consumers, what you call the rocket and feather effect? Would you agree that that's a feature of the food system?
I think I need to be careful. I'm a regulator, so I can't make general statements, Chair, and I think it would be improper. I think what we do is in respect of those matters that we have seen. If you think of the bread cartel, for example, we found that there was collusion by bread producers, and we referred a complaint to the tribunal, and they were found to have contravened the Act. So in respect of those cases where there is contravention, we do so, and we do say so. In respect of those areas, as I said, where there may not be contravention per se, but may cause some consumer harm, we use our research or advocacy work to make those statements, and we have published those. So I don't want to make general statements as a regulator. I think it would be irresponsible. But in respect of those areas that we would have researched, or those cases where we would have investigated and made findings, we do so, and we have submitted some of that. And I think that would be the most responsible way of responding to that statement, Chair.
Understood. So let me ask it another way. How effective do you think the Commission has been in terms of identifying and acting against abuses of power in the food system? Do you feel that, for example, the bread price fixing scandal is unlikely to happen again? Or could it still be happening and we're not picking it up?
So I think what we do, I mean, I think a couple of things. We think intervening through prosecution helps with deterring conduct. And so we believe that when we find that there is a contravention and we intervene, successfully take respondents firm through the system, that has a deterring effect. But we also believe that our advocacy role plays a critical role in trying to get firms to comply. But that does not mean that people will not try to be repeat offenders. What has the legislature done is, you recall that in terms of the Act, we only have a penalty of 10% across the board. In order to deal with some repeat offenders, the Act was amended in 2019 to say where you have a repeat offender, you then can impose a fine of up to 25%. So these are all the interventions that both the legislature and ourselves are looking to deal with instances where you may have repeat offenders. But we use, as I said, our research, monitoring of what is happening in the markets to see if these conducts are happening. But perhaps, Chair, what I should have also said is we do rely on members of the public to lodge complaints with the Commission as well, as a mechanism of alerting us to some of these harmful practices that may be happening, to help us to do so. We are working on some tools, digital tools, to look at detection, particularly on cartels, for example, as to make us even more efficient. So while we think that we are doing what we can do, we are always looking at ways to make ourselves more efficient and more effective in detecting harmful practices. And I think all of us have a role to assist us in detecting those, but we are proactively looking at those areas. Our research work is quite helpful as well as picking out those areas. I don't know, Andile, Hadin, or James, if you want to add.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to underscore this point about the role of the public and other players and other industry players or other players within the value chain, because we have to work with either a complaint that comes in, or when we initiate, it should be based on either the research that comes from the Commission or other detection tools. To the extent that we have on the matters that have been before us, we think that we have been able to discharge those to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Yes, we could.
I want to go back to the bread price fixing scandal. That was an effective detection and prosecution, and I understand that you have limits on what you can, what actions you can propose. So in that case, Tiger Brands was fined the equivalent of 6% of 1 year of its bread turnover revenue, and Pioneer Foods was fined 10% of 1 year of its bread turnover revenue. So in other words, minimal punishment. Do you feel that, and I know you said that the cap has gone up now to 25%, do you feel that just fines are sufficient? And is there no cases where people can be prosecuted, for example, at an individual level for breaking the law in these areas? Do you feel that your powers are enough to have this deterrent effect that you talked about?
I just to come back to, so there are two things. One is, we're not the only role players. And so in respect of that, and that's why I keep on talking about our mandate. So to the extent that our mandate is there, I think it plays that deterrent effect, that mandate. But the Act, there are other role players, I think, that should continue to deal with some of the other areas. The Act was amended, as you know, to introduce, and this was post the bread cartel and many other cartels, to introduce criminal prosecution on collusion. And those provisions have not been tested yet, and they do need to be tested in respect of some of these, the work that has subsequently come, and there needs to be work that we, together with the National Prosecuting Authority, needs to be working on. As you know, prosecution is the function of the National Prosecution Authority and not the Competition Commission. But I think there needs to be work that happens there in respect of that work. So yeah, so I do think that it's something that can still be tested more. I do believe that our advocacy work has the capacity to be more, at least encourage more compliance by firms than not, over and above our enforcement work.
Thank you, that's very clear.
All right, thank you, Prof. and Commissioner, for your extensive submissions.
Maybe before I continue with I put the questions I wanted to put to you. You've provided clarity in terms of your powers in relation to inquiries. In terms of the monitoring reports, can I just have clarity? What powers do you have in relation to that? Do you make recommendations in those monitoring reports?
Are you referring to the essential food
Yes.
price? No, those are advocacy soft law tools. We do, so they are not enforcement tools.
Yes, I'm aware, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, do you have recommendations to say, this is what we found, we recommend, but we understand it's not
Yeah.
not like you
Oh.
are putting down the law, but do you make recommendations in those reports?
Sometimes, I think, James, you can come in on that.
Yes or no? I just want to know whether I should ask the questions that I want to ask at this point.
Yeah, just casting my mind back, it's not something we typically would include.
Okay.
It's more to highlight the trends and
Okay.
highlight where there are deviations, like a rocket and feather effect.
Okay, but you will not propose what should be done about it at all?
So all our research can feed into potential initiations by the Commission.
Okay.
So if we think that there is, let's say, sufficient evidence to have a reasonable inference and sufficient to initiate and self-initiate, we may do that and then do a proper investigation using our investigative powers. And so even our research that we're doing with the Department of Agriculture at the moment, coming out of that, there may be things that concern us and sufficiently concern us that we may think there's a contravention of the Act, and so we could initiate. So it's typically almost related investigations that
Yeah.
might stem from some of the work.
All right. I do not have time, so I'll request that questions, the responses be brief. Then may I then just get an understanding, when you are saying you are doing advocacy work, what form does it take? Do you just go to Parliament? Do you go to meet with the department to say, we have a problem, and you'll have nothing to say to the department to say, I think you should look at this, I think you should consider it this. So are you saying, so maybe just unpack, what do you mean you are doing advocacy where there's no solution or proposal? I understand you're not binding to a stakeholder that you are engaging for purposes of advocacy work.
So let me say, essential food price monitoring or the cost of living report would be a form of advocacy. But there are
Yes.
different forms of advocacy.
Yes.
So if you think about what James is talking about, one of the studies, food security study that we're doing with the department, that
Okay.
is some form of a research. And in fact,
Yes.
you may find recommendations that come out of that.
Okay.
And from there, you do certain things. So that's how it will come across. So take the essential food price monitoring function as well. It was one of the triggers that got us to the fresh produce market inquiry, because we were seeing certain trends in fresh produce, and we then initiated the fresh produce market inquiry. So that recommendation might not be in the essential food price monitoring, but the monitoring and the outcomes that we see may trigger us to do another, to use another tool we have
Okay.
and deal with it in that way.
All
So,
right.
so it's not, so there are various forms of advocacy.
Yes.
There is public awareness
Yes.
of the law and saying, remember, these are the provisions of the Act, you're required to comply, and if you do A, B, C, D, and E, you don't comply, and this is what will happen to you. So that's the public awareness. But then there would be targeted interventions where, for example, we look at regulations of government and we say they are creating a barrier in ABC in this way, and this is what we propose should be done. The example we gave on the fisheries license, for example, the advocacy division made submissions on what they think the framework that was being proposed what impact it would have on SMEs and HDP licensees and how that should be amended. So there will be all of that.
It differs basically from report to report. Okay.
Precise.
Then let's go into the specifics. Your 2023 Essential Food Price Monitoring Report, was there any recommendation to anybody in that report?
I cannot remember
All the
2023.
colleagues who were sworn in?
Yes, but I think, can I just say, they will have to go back into
they wouldn't
that.
know. Okay.
I don't think it's something that we would know. But what we can do is, as part of the supplementary, we can do that. But
Okay.
also, may I say, Chair, through you, if there is specific questions that you think you want from that report, you can ask us, and then we can deal with it, whether we could have or could
Made.
not have in those circumstances, or what the outcomes was of something
And
like that.
I'm assuming that is the same response for all the reports, because this is the important report that dealt with the retail prices for white and brown bread, as well as maize. So I just want to, I think for us will be benefited to know basically what recommendations have you made and the state of implementation of those recommendations, because I think if you've already made a finding or recommendation, then it means that either we amplify or we don't have to make the same recommendation. So I think that's why for us it's really important to have a sense, and I will list the reports. I've indicated the Essential Food Price Monitoring Report that dealt with the price of brown bread, white bread, and maize meal, as well as another report which is of interest to our work, your 2021 also Essential Food Pricing report, which indicated, which dealt with the market concentration, I believe, anti-competitive practices insofar as leases is concerned. So we just want to know what were the key recommendations, where you are in terms of implementation. Also another, let me just double check if I have all the reports. Also your 2025 Essential Food Price Monitoring Report, which does show that that the increases, the retailer price hikes were not justified by production costs. So we just want to know what you've recommended and what has been done. And lastly, the other report that will be of critical importance is that report that you've touched on in your discussion with Prof, the fresh produce market inquiry, but also just delving more into the recommendations and the state of implementation. And I think that then will dispense with most of the questions, because that's basically the main area of questioning I was interested in. But then the remaining question that I have, because we've seen in the various submissions we've received from stakeholders who've taken note of the important work that you're doing as the Competition Commission, but a number of stakeholders, for example, Just Transition, they've raised concern that you need more powers. But I heard you in your presentation, you said your act was amended in 2019 to give you more powers. So I just want to have a sense from you whether you also share that view that for you to better protect consumers, the Competition Commission needs more powers, and which powers are those? Because there's still that view, despite the amendments, that you need more powers as the Commission.
Just let me say this in relation to the first questions on the reports. I think, as we said, it's unlikely that in those reports we would have made recommendations. Highly unlikely that we would have made. We may have picked up, and as I said in my presentation, that it matters for us that in some instances, some of the conduct, although harmful, might not be a contravention in terms of the act, but we still recognize its impact in the market, even if it's for a short period of time, and we use the soft law as a mechanism to highlight that, so that those who are doing it are aware that other authorities are aware of that conduct, and it is harmful conduct. So in respect of that, that's the first question.
Maybe
In
before
respect-
you get to the second question, let me ask a follow-up related to the first question. But you said you'll also double check and you can confirm in writing. But were those reports sent to, a bit beyond the publication for the consumption of members of the public, were those reports sent to any organ of the state? Those reports, specifically those reports that I've referred to for their attention, specifically, outside of the normal publication?
We just publicize it,
Yeah.
but often they will form part of our quarterly reports when we report to government, but just as reporting on the work that we do.
Okay, and you report to who specifically in government?
Department
quarterly?
of Trade, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition.
Okay. And then when you report, what is the general expectation from the Competition Commission? Is it just for them to just take note of the work that you've done? What is the general expectation when you submit those reports?
The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition has an oversight role on the Commission, and would engage with us on our reports, and we report to Parliament as well, remember, and we go there and we speak. But I think it's very important that we recognize the role of these reports.
Yes.
They are intended as discussions in the public domain. They are not an enforcement intervention. I think we need to understand.
Yes, that point is made. Maybe you are not understanding where I'm coming from. So I think that point was made and it was taken, that they are enforcement. But as the South African Human Rights Commission, as we've done with Stats SA, you may not have had the benefit of listening to our engagement, where they told us they produce reports that show signs where the country is. And the question we also asked them, that someone must pick that up, and we're trying to identify who is that person that we can ask. But there is this report. What have you done about it? So I'm not saying, I understand it's not an enforcement report, but it's important for us in that context to understand, to say the competition presented this concerning issue to you. What have you done about it? Hence, I asked if there are engagements you might have had with government stakeholders, even other organs of state, where you present the issues, because you've already clarified where there's no direct legal infringement, you cannot do much about it. So that is why I was pressing on that. But the commissioner has told me that my time is up, so you can respond to the issue of the powers. And I just want to check if I have any other question other than the remaining issue of the powers. Oh, and lastly, one of our presenters, Amandla, they've recommended that the Competition Commission must investigate the price difference between farm gate and retail prices if you can just clarify, do you have the powers to action? That's one of the recommendations they've made, to say the Competition Commission must investigate the price between farm gate and retail prices. So that is a short answer, whether you actually have the powers to do what they have recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, can I go back to, I sought to distinguish between the essential food price monitoring report and the fresh produce market inquiry. So in respect of that, there will be that's an intervention where we have powers, and in respect of that, we will have made findings, remedial actions, and recommendations. And those would also be time-bound even. And so we would have monitoring reports in respect of those, which, what are the findings, who is implementing, who is challenging, and where are we having challenges, and where the ones, for example, in respect of bylaws, for example, as I said, municipalities have been given 5 years to review their bylaws. When does the 5-year come, and how do we help them to ensure that they do so? So in respect of like the fresh produce market inquiry, we should be able to do a report to you where we explain to you what those recommendations were, the timeline and the implementation. Yes, yes, so that we can do. In respect of powers, I think you are right. We have, the Act was amended, and I think most of the powers we require were strengthened, and one of them was in relation to market inquiries, to make sure that the Commission had the power to make binding remedial actions, and so that power has been included in the Act. I'm not sure I would say powers necessarily. Maybe there may have to be some amendments to the Act to clarify, to look at processes and procedures, but it's not powers. I'm not aware, and I have 2 deputy commissioners here, and they might be able to help me here, but I'm not aware of any burning issue in relation to power that we would want to. We're strengthening regulation procedures and those type as we go along, and that's part of the work that we do to deal with efficiencies. Mr. Rachisusu, I don't know if you are aware of any powers we may require. James and Hadid. He's not under oath yet. He's not under oath. He will once he's been sworn in, he can answer, or he can whisper to me, and then I can do that. But James, are you aware?
No, I wouldn't say on powers. I think to the Commissioner's point on process, that certainly more enforcement action can take considerable time, and that is a challenge when you are dealing with sudden spikes in food prices and the like, to actually be timely about it. And so that is something one has to think about. How do we ensure we have more timely action? And that is why sometimes advocacy is taken as an option, even if there is an enforcement option. So that is a challenge, because we also have separation of investigation from adjudication. And so it's also the times in the court, and also the processes of the court to give due administrative process that can also be abused at times.
Andile.
I just wanted, Chair, to deal with 2 things. The first one is that the Commission collaborates with other institutions. So its power is exercised in that context. So there are certain things that we implement. I mean, I think we referred in our presentation to the relationship we have with the department at DALRAD. And that's part of making sure that we exercise our power in collaboration with others in order to crowd in better outcomes. The second thing that I wanted to just state, I think the question about whether we in these reports, you would see that we look at both producer, processor, and retail price in all of the essential food price reports. So that information is there. But I think what may be important is if there are specific complaints about specific products, that could be a complaint sent to the Commission that the Commission would have to deal with. The last point that I wanted to deal with, Chair, is that also it's important to characterize the word finding, because what is in a research report is not necessarily a finding in the sense of the law, and therefore there is very limited action that you can take except advocacy and of course initiating then an enforcement process to arrive at a finding in terms of an investigation or an inquiry. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions, Ms. Mulombo? No. I'm looking at the time and we unfortunately do not have time. I'd perhaps want to propose, are those burning questions? Okay. I'm going to start with Commissioner Nduli. Any questions from yourself, Commissioner?
Commissioner, thank you so much for your very well presented submissions this afternoon, and thank you to your team. I have a few questions. In the interest of time, I will just place all of the questions to you. You can make a note of them. You can submit others with your other supplementary answers, and those you can respond to this afternoon, you may. Some of them have been covered by the evidence leader. But just to add, on the top 5 retailers that control 64% of the grocery market, and this is in terms of the grocery market inquiry, what steps have you taken since that inquiry to reduce this concentration, and how are you measuring the impact of those changes? That would be the first question. The second question relates to the fresh produce markets. You've spoken quite a lot about the fresh produce market, and I think we would all agree this is perhaps where we all share a common interest with regards to access, particularly for small-scale farmers and producers. And this is where municipal bylaws are implicated. Now, you found limited access for small-scale farmers and producers to these markets. In terms of your recommendations and the outcomes of that inquiry, which municipalities, if you are able to inform us, have implemented reforms? What reforms have been implemented? What lessons are you learning from those reforms? And in what ways are we able then to duplicate or reproduce the lessons from the municipalities that would have implemented any reforms? And equally, what enforcement mechanisms do we have for municipalities that would otherwise not implement your recommendations? Issues related to water license delays, financing barriers have also come out quite strongly in your presentation. One would want to understand how significant these delays and barriers are in preventing new farmers from entering the market. And what reforms are we able then to implement or introduce in order to address these barriers and delays? You've also spoken about the exclusive leases. Are you able to inform us whether, since the inquiry, the concentration in terms of the exclusive leases have reduced? And if so, to what extent? And if not, why? And what other mechanisms do we need to introduce in our practices to be able to address these challenges? Does the Commission, and this is the next question, do you track prices between the formal and the informal market? And if so, are you able to assist us in perhaps doing some kind of comparative analysis between the formal and the informal markets? And then the last question or so from myself would be the global and national interface, particularly when it comes to seed supply, which is where perhaps this is where the concentration is in the international market. Agrochemicals seed supplies are dominated by the global firms. One would be interested to know the risks that are inherent in the structure. What risks are present and inherent, and does this pose a particular risk to our national food sovereignty, the concentration of seed supply in global firms? And what tools would be available for us to address this global concentration as it affects the domestic markets? Those would be the questions from my side. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I will ask James to deal with the grocery part, particularly the exclusive lease part, and the global and national interplay. On the fresh produce market inquiry, Chair, I will ask if we can come back to you in writing. As I said to the evidence leader, we can do a table of what are the remedies and recommendations we made. I know that in respect of most of the ones we did for municipalities, they had a time period within which to implement them. In respect of some remedies, they were implementable immediately, and I know that there are some, for example, with market agents, where those agreements have already been concluded, but I don't know the exact ones and the amount. So if we could just come back to you on that, Chair, in writing, setting out all of that in writing in a more comprehensive manner, if that's permissible, Chair. And then, and similarly, that would include both delays in water licenses and the funding, the blended finance funding component, because those are part of the fresh produce market inquiry. In respect of the last, I will ask James, and I don't know if Andile wants to come in as well on those last three. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for the questions. Just to be brief, we don't track the informal pricing. As I suppose we're more focused on market concentration and formal markets where market power can exist. So just our mandate means that we're probably in informal markets going to see less of that. But what we did find in the grocery retail market inquiry is that for some of the products for informal traders like spaza shops that they secure from formal businesses and processors, they will often have higher prices, which puts them at a disadvantage compared to the national retailers. And we've just completed a survey of township and rural businesses, in which there is also some findings around pricing, but that'll be released quite shortly. On exclusive leases and reducing concentration, because I'm going to blend them. The exclusive leases, as I mentioned, there was an immediate impact in terms of they were no longer enforceable against small grocery retailers or black-owned grocery retailers. And then there was a phase out against each other, so ShopRite as opposed to Pick and Pay. The ending of the leases was one way to address concentration because it allowed new entrants in. What you would see happening before is a smaller group like Choppies or Food Lovers Market that wants to get into a shopping mall can't because of the exclusivity, and now they can. And I think from your own experience, you would probably see now there is more competition. But we did see a lot of entry on the back of that, and interestingly, particularly in that low end of the market, at the sort of Boxer, U-Save competition intensified quite considerably after this. And although Pick and Pay has had troubles, the Boxer division has done quite well and has expanded more aggressively against Checkers in that area. We are doing another concentration report, so it's hard to monitor concentration across the economy annually, but we are, as the Commissioner said, going to release another report update shortly, which allows us to see if there is being impact. But obviously there's also other things in the market. Pick and Pay's difficulties have made it less expansive versus ShopRite at the moment, and so these other factors can play out. Just on the global and seed supply, I don't think it's for us to talk about the sort of threats to national food sovereignty. That's not something, again, that's typically within our mandate, but obviously we look at concentration and pricing. And there has been, as you noted, concentration at the seed level, and we noted in particular highly concentrated. I think some of the questions that we should be asking ourselves is also the distribution layer. So sometimes it is linked to exclusive distribution of particular seeds, and we've seen problems in, for instance, potatoes, where that exclusivity then transfers market power to a local distributor, and ensuring that the trials and access to the latest varieties happen is also an important aspect as well. So I think as you consider these things, also think about the domestic leg of that component as well.
It's just one point, Chair, that I would like to raise on concentration. That the Commission has some role within its mandate, but I think this is the one area that requires an all-of-government approach and all the other role players, because even if you remove the exclusive leases, somebody still needs to fund that entry, support that entry, and so there is a need for better coordination to achieve. That is beyond in the leases, but in terms of other areas of the economy. That we have a particular limited role. There are other players who need to come in and facilitate the entry to achieve then a much more deconcentrated economy. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's very
Thank you so much. In terms of now it's clear. Thank you. In terms of the question on the global concentration and in terms of the seed supply, we are seeing an increased proliferation of GMO seeds coming into the country as opposed to organic seed. Would it be within your mandate to also monitor this proliferation of GMO seed as a result of the global concentration? That would be the last question. Thank you so much. And if it's not within your mandate, whose mandate would it be within? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure it would be a mandate, but I would imagine the Department of Agriculture, there is a, it's a pity, Chair, that Mr. Rachisusu has not been sworn in, because I know this is one of the areas that they were looking at. There is a seed bank or a food something bank, which is an entity that resides within the Department of Agriculture, and I think they may be able to do so. But what I wanted to say still is that if it is something that comes as a result of market power or through some concentration or an effect with a merger, that's something we would look at if it is an outcome of an exercise of power. But that hasn't come about yet. We haven't seen that yet, that link in the work that we do, but it might come through those two areas, but we haven't seen that yet. But I think the Department of Agriculture should be able to help on how there would be some standards on these sort of things, Chair. And hopefully Mr. Rachisusu, once sworn in, might be able to answer some of these questions, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kunena, any questions from your side?
Thank you so much, Chair. I wanted to find out if you do your own accord investigations, because to a large extent I heard you stressing that people must report. And then I ask myself, do you also not have a mandate to go an extra mile where you can do it yourself, having had regard of what would be happening on the ground? Can I pause there? That's my first question.
Chair, we do. And I think I may have said, so we in terms of the Act, we can initiate a complaint where we have reason to believe that there is a contravention. Andile, in fact, I think spoke a bit on that. So these are the two ways in which we investigate. It's either through the Commissioner initiating, once she has reasons to believe, through information that may come to the Commissioner's attention, or through complaints. And the initiation, Chair, we deal with them as part of our proactive work, and that's why we do all these research, all these monitoring and detection. It is in those instances where the Commissioner then initiates. You would have seen in my very first slide where we talk about toolkit, we spoke about research that we do, and one of that was for case initiation. So we will have our Economic and Research Bureau do research in certain specific sectors where we think there may be concerns. And if there are concerns, then the Commissioner will then initiate a complaint in those sectors. Similarly, with market inquiry, I gave an example of the fresh produce market inquiry, for example. It was through also our essential food price monitoring process that we realized that there was a concern in fresh produce, and therefore initiated a market inquiry in the fresh produce market inquiry. So these are all the many ways in which we can initiate or investigate complaints. Thanks, Chair.
Now, you've also said that there has been an amendment insofar as your powers are concerned. Now, ever since then, has there been a change insofar as the behavior of the different businesses? Has that been realized? For me, how I see it, it's probably a moving target. I would think that they learn best practices of how to ensure that they beat the system. So the Competition Commission alert to that? Are you taking into account of same? And again, most importantly, as of now, and if you don't have the information, you're welcome to say so, and it can be divulged at a later stage, where you can say that ever since we have been empowered differently, this is where we are insofar as the change. And the reason why I really ask that is that from the submission we've had since the morning, the cry out there is that the food is very expensive. The poor people cannot afford it. I would even think that even the middle class, it's almost difficult for them to really afford the food when one has regard to the prices of food at large. And I'm mindful of the fact that I think I don't really have time. Commissioner will probably say that, and I'm going to say, let me ask all my questions and then I can leave it at that. So you also spoke about advocacy as a, can I say, a tool that you are using in order to, I would think this is in line with educating members of the public, but can you share with us how has that changed the spectrum in terms of people really understanding what does the Competition Commission do? I would think that that would be something that you're trying to achieve, which is something that we also do as a commission from time to time, to ask certain questions, but also at the same time to go out there and really advocate. So when the Competition Commission identifies harmful market conditions, what is it that they're expected to do, except for the fact that you have written it in the report? Do you immediately go into investigation? Do you turn that into an investigation inquiry where you can then make those findings so that you can be able to then hold those who would have been involved to account in terms of the recommendations that you would have made? Is there a success story that you can give us in terms of your work that you have done? Because at the moment, as I said, the narrative out there is that it does not look like much is being done. And from where I'm sitting as a country, it looks like we have very good laws. We've got very good institutions that are doing the work. But what I translate to what the people on the ground would want to see, I sort of am not really able to see that. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Andile will start.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will just cover the issues related to advocacy, and I think just to give some examples. And of course, these would not be examples within the area of food, but in other areas. For instance, in the automotive aftermarket, we intervened, engaged market parties, and were able to agree with the sector on a guideline that says this is what we consider as a sector, as market participants, as acceptable conduct. So that's part of what we can achieve. I mean, another example, when a lot of players were complaining about being able to get into panels of banks, I mean, advocacy, through our advocacy function, we were able to get some of the banks to put HDP and small players in that regard. So that's part of what we have been able to do, Chair. Just on this, I think the question about very good laws and very good institutions and impact is something that has seized the Commission over the last 5 years, about how impactful, even in terms of our planning, in terms of our targeting, that go beyond the activities that we are supposed to be doing, but also to look at what are the actual outcomes that we are targeting. It has been a journey, Chair, and we do recognize that we still have a long way to go, but we think that we have been able as an organization just to psych ourselves to not just focus on activities and outputs, but what are the outcomes for the people. Chair, I must say that the change in behavior in the market is a function of many things. But when you have, as you would have seen in the concentration report, the levels of concentration that you have, you are likely to have some of these challenges. And I think, as I said, it is important for us to think about and I think it's a priority of the 7th administration, how do we deconcentrate the economy? How do we bring more players into the economy? Because we all know, I mean, there are various studies that show that the increased participation and increased competition will have certain outcomes. We are not there yet, Chair. And we think that this is something that should be an all-of-government approach to deal with some of these areas. I think Commissioner and James will deal with the rest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James.
Maybe just to start on the expensive food issue, and I think, you know, the complexity of your task is partly that there are global forces and some local forces that may legitimately be affecting the cost or supply of certain foodstuffs. And then on top of that, you may have either market power and other issues, or just malfunctioning markets. So to take an example, you know, our futures prices for commodities that would be in oilseeds, in wheat, in maize, are all heavily influenced by global commodity markets, and shocks like the Ukraine war or supply congestions will play out and feed into the domestic markets. I mentioned that we had, or the Commissioner mentioned that we have a very, let's say, large-scale commercial model. It's especially vulnerable to oil price shocks because they use chemical fertilizers derived from oil production, and of course there's transport costs. Now we're going to see a major spike in food inflation coming up because of that. And that goes to the structure of agriculture in the economy. You need large scale to get certain supply, but you also need a more diverse agriculture system, because work we've done and we've reflected in our essential food price monitoring reports is that in fact urban agriculture often can be very cost effective and not subject to these shocks because it uses food waste as fertilizer and there's low logistics costs because you're close. But that's about access to land, that's about access to do urban agriculture. So I think there's let's say, the structure of agriculture and the model that's used, and how do we diversify that to protect ourselves from some of these shocks that will happen. You know, on commodity markets, about 20 years ago, there was a decision to restrict speculative behavior in South Africa on the futures exchange. But no such restriction exists at the Chicago board. And there is a lot of academic work that says that in times of almost shocks, you can have an overcorrection where prices go up much higher than is really warranted by supply and demand conditions. But we don't set the rules for that, and we're part of an integrated global experience. So, you know, some people have sort of looked at, are there other ways we can buffer against some of the shocks? Because it's often the shocks that really affect us. Things like returning to reserve storages and things like that that can be released to the market. On the sort of impact, you know, I can report on a number of them, but just to take a few instances, I think in COVID we challenged the notion of supermarkets rationing through price increase, which was considered, you know, a rational economic response, that there's a shortage of supply, so therefore we push the price up. And that we challenged successfully in court. And the principle still stands through. So when the egg prices, there was avian flu, another shock, 3 million egg-laying chickens were put down. But we did engage publicly and with the retailers that rather than just pushing up price, can we ration rather? And a lot of retailers did in fact follow that model. So they rather ration too, because that's a fairer system than using price, which is an unfair system because it's highly unequal. If you look at over time some of the trends, I think the Commissioner mentioned cooking oil. When we saw deviation, what we have seen is a correction of that. So that difference in margin came down dramatically. And we've seen some restraint in certain products from retailers or processors because of that. And so there are measurable impacts in terms of just looking how margins have moved or the spreads have moved in some of these products. But as I said, you've got overlaying this is, you know, if oil goes over $100, fertilizer prices will go through the roof. Our industry is dependent on that. That'll push up costs. All the logistics will go up. And you can't control that. And it's not necessarily profiteering, but it is obviously impacting. And so it's sort of balancing these out, but also looking at maybe an agricultural policy that seeks to reduce the level of shocks that we're subject to in South Africa.
Thank you, Chair.
Just two questions from me. One, do you think that the fines imposed are effective? I know that before 2019 it was 10%, and now it's 25% for a repeat offender. But do you think currently the fines are effective? And then my second question is, in terms of recommendations to government, you stated that you don't, the recommendations are not binding on government. How does that work? Because sometimes it's important to make make recommendations that are binding on government to ensure that they are able to implement legislation that regulates the industry, because the industries themselves are finding it difficult to do so. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, you know, the issue on recommendations, what we found is, in fact, where we do make the recommendations, but we also couple that with advocacy, that those recommendations actually often are implemented. So it's a matter of us actively ensuring that those are done. And so we try and and follow up and put timelines and then engage with the authorities involved. And that's not just even in market inquiries, even in where we're making submissions on draft legislation, for example, we will participate. And often we found through advocacy work that various government departments will in fact take heed of some of the issues we're raising to do that. And that, I think, is also part of making sure that we do our work well so that we are trusted, so that the people who we are making recommendations to take the work that we do seriously. So we try and do that and engage with them to ensure that that happens. And that is part of how we monitor and manage that work. So that's the model we have tried to do. And monitoring, Chair, requires a lot of resources, and we are trying to put resources in place for this internally. We have established a new market inquiry division, which will be responsible for market inquiries, but also monitoring remedies that already exist or recommendations that already exist through the system. So we're working on that to make sure that it happens. Fines, Chair. So there was a period, Chair, where fines were quite high. In fact, if you think of the bread, in fact, at the time when the Commission imposed the fine on Pioneer, and I think I stand corrected. I think the fine against Pioneer, it was the highest at the time. We hadn't imposed the fine on AMSA, I think, at the time. That was one of the highest fines we had imposed as an institution on the bread cartel. It was bread and wheat and maize and others, so it was settling most of that. But so they do have a deterrent effect, Chair. But as Jane said, it's a combination of things that we need to be doing to make sure that that deterrence happens. It's credible enforcement action that leads to conclusion, or in some instances, Chair, is in fact settlements with parties. It's not in food. We initiated a complaint against Johnson & Johnson in one of the drugs on multi-resistant TB. That initiated by the Commission following information that it had received from stakeholders. We then engaged with Johnson & Johnson. It also included a secondary patenting of a Johnson & Johnson drug. We managed in a couple of months to settle with Johnson & Johnson, where Johnson & Johnson not only did they agree to not implement their secondary patent in South Africa, but to all middle-income countries globally, they reduced the price of the drug to our government by something like 45%. So there are instances where our intervention, and there was no penalty, but the impact of that on the health, the public health care, and the people of South Africa was quite significant. So there are other mechanisms we try and use. James mentioned that sometimes litigation takes long to get to a point where you even impose a fine. But there are some interventions, some fast-tracking interventions that we can put in place to ensure that that action ceases immediately and we see the impact immediately. So we do where we can, Chair, do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Just in closing, just a reminder of the supplementary submission as well as the submission of the following documents. The 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 joint project with the Department of Agriculture, you're saying that it's the 31st of March 2026. Once you have that report, can you just furnish the commission with it? The 2023 report on essential food price monitoring report on the price of brown bread, white bread, and maize. A reply in terms of the anti-competitive practice in terms of leases. The 2025 essential food price monitoring report. The fresh produce market inquiry report, as well as the implementation of the remedial actions and how far you are. The impact or the monitoring reports in respect of the bylaws and the impact thereof. The survey of township and rural businesses. Once you have that survey, can you also then provide it to the commission? The grocery market inquiry, as well as the process of the implementation of the recommendations. Commissioner Dule, am I missing anything from your side? Shelley, anything?
No, Commissioner, just to clarify that you did mention some of the report, but I think it's a list for them just to go if there were recommendations. I think you've clarified even those meetings where there was some advocacy to, yes, all those reports and how far we are, yeah.
Thank you so much. You are now released from the witness podium. We're going to take a short comfort break because we've been sitting for a while, and then we're going to allow your colleague to come in. The midnight shift is always the interesting one, so I hope that he saw what Mr. Maleka did yesterday, and then when he comes here, he then wakes us up for the last set of the day. Thank you. 5 minutes. We'll be back at 16 past 4.
Chair, just to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. As we enter the last segment of today's inquiry, we will ask the colleagues from the National Consumer Commission to... Is it okay? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for being present on time. I saw that you were waiting. Just for the record, if you can just stand so that you introduce yourself, or will you be presenting alone or with your colleague? Okay. So she'll also be presenting or answering questions. Okay. Just for the record, if you can just stand up, full names.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Hadin Rachisusu. I'm Acting Commissioner of the National Consumer Commission.
So you're acting commissioner, and then you're a deputy commissioner at the consumer, at the competition
Also,
commission. No, I'm just for clarity, because earlier on they said that you're a deputy commissioner, so I want to use the correct title in terms of this position. So you are an acting commissioner at the National Consumer Commission.
Yes, I am here for the National Consumer Commission. So I'm not placing myself on record as Deputy Commissioner
Okay,
of
thank
the
you.
Competition Commission.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
So
you.
just so that, will you be taking an oath or an affirmation?
An oath, anything is fine.
So it will be the oath. Do you consider that the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes,
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
so help me God.
Thank you. You can hand over to your colleague.
Good afternoon. My name is Imran Magoro. I'm the Senior Manager at Enforcement and Legal Services within the NCC.
All right. Ma'am, will you be taking the prescribed oath or affirmation?
The oath, please.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you say that the evidence you're about to present before the commission is the truth, nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Duly sworn in, you have 20 minutes, then you have 20 minutes with the evidence leaders, and then we call it a Friday. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chairperson, Commissioners, and evidence leaders, and to South Africans who are watching us today. I will be presenting before you the National Consumer Commission's response to the questions that we received. We first received the questions through our ministry, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and then later on we discovered that there was a letter also that was sent to us separately. So I worked on that letter. I sent you the response, and my apology for submitting that response late. I think you would have received it yesterday, I think yesterday, late yesterday. So I've said my name is Hadin Rachisusu, Acting Commissioner, National Consumer Commission, and Imran has already introduced herself. I will touch briefly on the legislative mandate, the vision, mission, and values of the NCC, and response to the SARC questions. The National Consumer Commission is established in terms of Section 85 of the Consumer Protection Act 2008, Act 68 of 2008. The purpose of this act, amongst others, is to promote and advance the social and economic welfare of consumers in South Africa generally, and in particular, low-income persons or persons in low-income communities, those persons who live in remote, isolated or low density areas, minors, seniors, or other vulnerable consumers, and those that are illiterate, vision impaired, or with limited fluency in the language the information is presented. The Act also protects consumers from unconscionable, unfair, unreasonable, unjust, or otherwise improper trade practices, and promotes a fair, accessible, and sustainable marketplace for consumer products and services, and establish national norms and standards relating to consumer protection. Furthermore, the CPA seeks to promote a fair, accessible, and sustainable marketplace for consumer products and services, and to establish national norms and standards relating to consumer protection. I will not go further now on this mandate, but just to note that we do have concurrent jurisdiction on consumer protection matters with provincial consumer affairs offices. We are also supported by the OMBAT schemes, the alternative dispute resolution schemes. In our case, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition have designated 2 of those schemes. The Motor Industry Ombudsman of South Africa, MIOSA, just focuses on automotive-related issues, and Consumer Goods and Services Ombuds. So the consumer goods then interfaces also with food, probably related things. Our vision as the NCC is a marketplace for consumer goods and services that benefit consumers and contributes to economic growth, industrialization, and sustainability. The mission is to curb unfair business practices for a fair, safe, and sustainable marketplace for consumer goods and services. Our values are fairness, integrity, and good corporate governance. This is our promise to the nation. We have identified 9 key priority areas. So this is in terms of our strategy, the current strategy that we are implementing. So we are focusing on unsafe and expired foods, second-hand automotive industry, unfair and unreasonable terms and conditions, non-compliant clothing, textiles, footwear, and leather goods, market monitoring of low quality and substandard locally produced or imported goods, false claims on carbon-friendly goods, which is we call greenwashing, scams and Ponzi schemes, and in e-commerce. These are the focus areas. I'm just losing network here, Commissioner, so hence I had to look there. It just kicked me out. I'm sorry about that.
IT, if we can also assist by flighting the presentation in the event that he then gets kicked out of the system.
Yeah, he did kick me out, yeah. So this is how we've responded to the questions. I'll be very brief, Chair and Commissioners. You asked us, how does the NCC ensure that consumers are protected from misleading claims, unsafe food products, or exploitative practices by food producers, manufacturers, distributors, and retailers? Broadly, we have the powers to initiate or receive complaints. We also have the powers to administer product recalls in the country in respect of unsafe products and unsafe goods. And where we find non-compliance, we can refer the matters to the National Consumer Tribunal, And if there's no resolution, then our matters go through the High Court. We don't have a specialist appeal court. And then SCA and all the other places. We also have the powers to issue immediately compliance notices. So if we find that there is a contravention that requires immediate action, the commissioner is empowered, of course, upon an investigation, to issue those compliance notices. And the next question was, what measures has the NCC taken to monitor and address excessive food pricing, unfair markups, or practices that restrict access to affordable and nutritious food for vulnerable populations? As I've said, what we have prioritized here and what we've picked up as a bigger problem in the country is this issue of substandard and unsafe goods or expired goods, essentially. And we pick this up through market monitoring investigations. So we have, and you'll find that it's mostly, your spaza shops, but also retailers. Some retailers do from time to time keep products that have expired, so we intervene there. And the products that we deal with, as I say, expired, the markups are so low. So those prices are priced, the products are priced at a very low price point to attract unsuspecting consumers. So it has not been about the higher prices. It has been about unsafe products that are being sold to vulnerable communities. We do these market monitoring initiatives. I was in Limpopo earlier today. We were celebrating World Consumer Rights Day, so the whole week our team has been there. And you will see that we work with a lot of other stakeholders, the police, even the operation in Limpopo that uncovered those illicit cigarettes. We were part of that, to the value of 25 million, and I think they say they are still counting. So we work a lot with local authorities in our day-to-day work. But maybe, Chair, I don't have to maybe repeat the whole, because this is the response I've given you. I'll try summarize and move quite quickly. How does the NCC regulate the marketing, labeling, and sale of ultra-processed foods, particularly for children? As I've said, we use product recalls. We can initiate investigations, but more importantly, we are empowered to investigate product quality in the country. So there's Section 55 that I've not put here, which is a very important provision of the CPA. So it says, consumers have the right to safe quality goods, and we enforce that against a standard. So we don't set the standard. It could be in food. It's mostly the Department of Health. It will set parameters that products must have these components. If ultra-processed foods are allowed, there's nothing that we can do ourselves. So we work against standards. That's what we enforce. I've just put here some of the product recalls that we did. To give you an example, we have had, there was a case where kids died in the Eastern Cape. Allegedly they'd consumed soft or porridge supplied by a Namibian company, Namib Mills. When we investigated with the local authorities, we could not connect those deaths to those children, to the products rather. So initially we had said the product must be recalled, but when we closed the investigation, we could not find any any wrongdoing on their part. I've just put some of the products here. You know, we do get from time to time, we have a case now on humus against BM Foods. This was picked up by ShopRite. We'll be prosecuting this company. Imran is working on that referral. I've just put a few there. We were trying to, pick those food-related recalls, but most of the recalls that we are getting now is on automotive. So the majority, I think I would say 80% of our recalls now are cars. How do we reach out? So we inspect, we do our market monitoring activities throughout the country, even where we have concurrent jurisdictions. So we don't say the provinces must deal with their issues. We proactively go into those areas where we identify risks. And I've just put places that we've been. This week we would have been in Limpopo, various other places. But my team is on the ground together with the police, the health practitioners, the health practitioners and so forth. Environmental health practitioners. Now, what are we picking up as a challenge when we do these inspections? And I've just identified the 3 top things that are problematic in our market. Is that you have goods with date markings that have passed sell-by or use-by dates in the market. I know the Department of Health is working on a regulation to clarify this. There's a lot of interpretation issues around this. People raise issues around food security and many other things. But our position as the NCC is that for as long as the party is profiting or wanting to make money from that product, once it has passed this date, it should not be on the shelf. We take it out. We're not saying that product cannot be donated. In fact, I've said this to stakeholders, that why do you wait for the last day to donate? So why do you wait for the last day? Why don't you, when you realize the dates are coming, you open up the products? Why must our people be fed expired stuff in the name of food security? So this is our position for now, Chair and Commissioners. So there's a requirement in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, and this is a challenging one, that the suppliers must issue proof of purchase receipts. So this doesn't happen in spaza shops. And why we insist on this is that if there's an issue, if something happens, someone buys a sweet from someone and we don't know where they bought it, we will not be able to intervene. So the good thing with this is that we've been engaging with government. You'll see that it's a small business fund that came immediately after the issue around expired foods and so forth, that government has also agreed that it will support the smaller guys so that they can formalize. Doesn't mean that it's a spaza shop, we don't deserve receipts. Right, so, or price display. The Consumer Protection Act requires that prices must be displayed. We need to know what those prices are. So we do awareness. As you have said, there's an issue around the labeling of goods. So Section 24 is very specific here. I think, Chair, I'm battling with the internet, I think. Maybe the colleagues can help. I think you'll share, right? Thank you very much. I'll leave this. So what happens is we are picking up products labeled in foreign languages. So Section 24 prescribes this, that products that are in a market must be labeled. We need to know what we are consuming. But we are finding that most of the people in vulnerable communities are buying this stuff. They don't even know what it is, but they keep buying it. So, and the next part, I'll be waiting, I'll move maybe chair in the interest of time, is that are you sharing? I want to see which question. Where's this question? You sharing, right? Yes, and I think the next thing I've dealt with the issue around ultra-processed things. I've dealt with labeling, which for us is a very important. It's an important issue. Yeah, 18, 19. And then the next question was, what programs or interventions exist to inform consumers about nutrition, product quality, and their rights under the Consumer Protection Act? And how effective have these been in improving informed food choices? So I've said we have a very extensive advocacy program. We have a team that's always on the ground. We do a lot of awareness raising campaigns. But what we are doing now with our current APP, and it's still before the minister, is that we need to be creative in using other media. I think gone are the days where we'll think we will be disseminating the messages by going and visiting specific communities. So if we start creatively using media or social media, doesn't cost us much. We should be able to reach out a lot of people. And the next one was, how do we ensure that low-income households or other vulnerable groups are included? So there's something very powerful in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. So we can accredit consumer protection groups. So the vulnerable people can get together, so people are allowed. Commissioner can accredit those groups. We have accredited an association of the blind. There was just some technicality around that. I'm on slide 21. There were just some, but I think we're gonna be regularizing that. So they approached us, we've given them the right to get together. We have received an application from the National Informal Business Agency, so these are informal groups. So this is how we can empower them in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. It's allowed for them to do this. So that process is a very simple process. So anyone who wants to mobilize consumers, they can come to us. How does the NCC coordinate it with health, agriculture, trade, industry, competition? As I've said, we work, maybe we can move to slide 23. We work very closely with almost all stakeholders. We just signed an MOU now with SARS. We're working on an MOU with the BMA. We work very closely with the health, Department of Health. So I would say all stakeholders in this space are our partners. We are not able to do this work alone. So for instance, if we have to do inspections, we need the police with us. We won't be able to execute this successfully. And last year we had this issue around foodborne illnesses, and we were part of the National Joint Operational Center, or National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure, NetJoints, with the DTIC and many other stakeholders. That's how we are able to be effective. That's how we are able to join forces with all stakeholders to deal with these issues. And the challenge, of course, we have a challenge now to measure our impact. But this minister said, well, we need to see what exactly is the NCC doing. So if we go with everybody and then we say, we like this consignment of 25 million, everybody would be wanting a piece of it, right? So we play our small role. So how do we quantify our? If we all calculate that 25 million, we end up double counting. So I'll report 25, another one reports 25. So we need to find a creative way of isolating the particular impact measurement for the National Consumer Commission. And you've asked us what are the gaps in. So we have, and I'll move quickly to slide 26. So there's something that we are proposing to the department. I call this a track and trace regulations. What this means is that we are suggesting that we formalize the informal sector. The products that are produced in the country should be able to be traced through barcodes. The EU is doing this, China is doing this. It helps our companies to also access those markets. So we are proposing to the minister that we should have track and trace regulations targeting illicit trade. So we can start with few products. We have tobacco, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, food, and consumer appliances. These are the high risk areas. So how can we track that this is not, or this is fake? How do you know, Chair? How do you know? Okay. So there is this barcoding convention. There's one big company that does this, GS1. It's got a lot of members. It allocates barcodes. But what usually, there are barcodes also available online. So if I want to start manufacturing concern, I just pick a barcode, I stamp here. But that barcode cannot be traced. So the ones for GS1 can be traced. With the track and trace regulations, we say this is the capacity also that we can develop in the country ourselves, so that we can support entrepreneurs who can develop this tracking mechanism. So this is the main proposal we've put to the minister, because we realize that illicit trade is costing, everybody talks about the 100 billion. But we ask ourselves as the NCC, what can we do to make a difference in this space? We think we track and trace product recalls that we are empowered to do. If we find something that we don't know, we can invoke those powers. Right now, I can't tell, but I'll drink the water, Chair, nonetheless. I'll drink. There's just some small amendments we've suggested. There are some trading name issues that need to be fixed. So those are the gaps I've put here. But the main gap for us is regulations. We think we can do more. So we have one regulation that targets clothing products at the border only, right? We work with SARS to check are they labeled properly and everything. There's nothing stopping us from expanding that regulation, aiding products where there's a high risk. So we can, so I see mostly regulatory, reforms through regulations, and regulations are quicker for us to make a meaningful difference. And in conclusion, Chair and Commissioners, as I've said, we've identified food markets. It's a priority area, but we are faced with many other problems from consumers. We have realized that with food, we do not have a lot of complaints. And I've been asking myself why. I think someone buys something out of necessity. If they taste it, they think it's okay, they'll most likely consume it. And they may never report it to anyone, but there's no evidence So if they eat it, they don't feel well. Probably they ate something in the morning or the day before. So it's going to be very difficult to tell, is this the product that has caused this problem? So I see a lot of challenges in our communities that the vulnerable do not have so many options. Then this is where we should chip in to look after them. You saw with the issues around organophosphate, we worked very closely with the Minister of Health because kids were dying. So they were blaming organophosphates. And the Minister of Health helped us to get the NHLS to look at these products, and we couldn't find the organophosphates in the chips. Organophosphates are being used to eliminate rodents. And that chemical, they say, is too strong. The moment you keep it in your house, you have a poison for days. That's how we have learned to understand about this product. And they've been banned for a reason, right? So this is, so from our side as the National Consumer Commission, Chair, Commissioners, Evidence Leaders, we welcome this inquiry. There are too many questions. There are also things we also don't understand around the value chain. As I have said, illicit trade is a big thing. We have not been able to unmask who is this player attacking our market with all of these products. So for us, it's a challenge. We've set ourselves the illicit trade as a main thing for the next 5 years. It was not our priority before as illicit trade. We would do small little things here and there, but we are not making a difference. There's still this person that we are still looking for. Maybe this commission may find out who is this driver of illicit trade in our country. Maybe you get the chair, you would have helped us a lot because we want that person. We want to prosecute them as in yesterday. Thank you, Chair. That's the presentation. I thought I just summarized based on the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acting Commissioner. Just before I hand over to the evidence leader, you used a very technical term for the pesticides. Can you perhaps, for those who are listening, can you use what it is referred to on the street so that when someone attempts to sell it to them, or now they know that one, it has been banned, two, what is the street name so that they can start coming to the National Consumer Commission to say, I went to this particular outlet and they attempted to sell me this banned pesticide. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. The street name I've got to know is that it's Ali Perimi. I don't know whether that person will be able to file a complaint. Because it seems it's a very dangerous thing, right? It's a dangerous thing, and it seems some people use it for other things. So the more a person is exposed, in fact, if they see they should not buy, if they see that there's someone selling these things, they must not buy. They must report. They must not touch, right? Mustn't touch those things. But we are quite interested, in those, and this is where we rely on the intelligence on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm handing over to the evidence leader.
Thank you so much, Acting Commissioner. I would just want to ask you, I've listened to the previous presentation as well, and it seems to me, that I know that you say you work with the Competition Commission, and if I look at their website, they talk more about, that they actually use talking to trade, and but then they say they respond to consumer complaints. But then you as well say, you know, why you are representing under the Consumer Protection Act the consumer. So I'm somewhat, you know, I'm not sure how much overlap is there, or is it a grey area, or do you actually have, are you distinctly different? And should consumers rather address complaints to you as regarding them, particularly food? And how well known is that? So I don't know if you want to respond, or do you want me to pose all the questions? Okay.
I can answer. Fortunately, I place myself on record as the acting commissioner, but I sit in both institutions. And the reason I'm there is that we're exploring a merger between the two entities. So that's why I'm there at this point in time. But what is clear to me, because I've been sent to make this assessment, is that these are complementary functions. So in simple terms, the Competition Act, it has a higher threshold to trigger a complaint. It looks at dominance if it's a pricing issue, right? So a company must be big for you to be able to do anything. There could be cartels, but those are very secretive things, so consumers will not know whether there's a cartel or not. Sometimes they don't even see it properly. Now, where does the Consumer Protection Act comes in? It's got this low standard. So this, when I talk about pricing, it talks about fairness. Is the price fair? So in this statute, you do not require dominance, right? So there are synergies between the two, because if there's a complaint that is notified with the Competition Commission, the Competition Commission can refer the person to the NCC, vice versa. But it requires someone who has an appreciation of both laws. I see them more as complementary. You can see, I mean, the Competition Commission doesn't deal with labeling, doesn't visit spaza shops, doesn't have to.
No, they don't do recalls either.
They don't do recalls,
Yes.
yes. They can't do recalls.
So then my second question is that you talk a lot about consumers, but who are the consumers that you're talking about? Is that all walks of life, or you know, is it our middle class, our poor consumers, or our needy consumers? And I think that for us it's distinctly important that who represent the handicapped as well, you know, in our country. And I think our commissioner has asked many other players in the past 2 days that question. So I was just wondering about that.
All right, as I've said, that's why I try to use that slide first. Right? Just look at the objectives of the Act, because it talks about the vulnerable people. But it also talks about fairness generally. Right, so it has zoomed the vulnerable, and those ought to be our focus. When you ask me consumers, who are the consumers? It's everybody, from an infant to the elderly. Everyone has to be looked after by the National Consumer Commission, essentially. But we can have a bias in our approach, right? Because we'll have to prioritize. That's why if you look at the list of things that I've put as 9 priorities, I'm not saying new cars. I'm not interested in, okay, new cars, maybe if there's a recall issue, then we get interested. But, well, those cars are under warranty and everything else, so there isn't much that will come out of that, right? But where there's the harm and a challenge, and I've seen this, someone goes on pension, they buy a car, they drive it out, it breaks down. That breaks me. So this is when I look at this, I say, what can I prioritize to make a difference to society? Is that old man or old lady who worked for 20, 30 years, 40 years, buys a car, wants to go to the village, he doesn't even get there. Now, there are protections in the Consumer Protection Act for that. They must know, everybody, I always say this, they know that there is no such thing as food stores in the country. That thing doesn't exist. And everybody there's an implied warranty of 6 months evidence later. This is our education. That the consumers must exercise the option. They have a right. Is it a right to refund, to replace, and so forth?
Okay, the next question is, in your strategic goal of a NCC, you include that you address the high cost of living. And how do you do this? Because I could not find that in the documentation that we received.
The cost of living question is starting from the medium term policy framework, right? Government says we want a capable state, we must address the cost of living generally. Now we have to fit into that. And where do we fit in? It's things around terms and conditions. Terms and conditions where you can't cancel your contract. You buy something, you want to cancel, they say no. You want to return it, that adds to the cost of living because you'll be forced to have maybe 2 of the things you don't need. So what we do, we measure the redress to consumers. So we add up all these little refunds. We know that that refund makes a huge difference to that person. So we don't trivialize it. If it's 1,000, we count it in, we are making a difference to that person. If it's a contract that someone has been refusing to cancel, what do? The money should be buying food. You must be paying something you don't need. So this is the angle. It's I would say indirect, so it's not a price issue. As I've said to you, if it's food, my worry is expired things. And the expired things are so attractive on price, right? So that's the thinking process.
Okay, and your report that you submitted also highlighted the dangers of ultra-processed foods, which are often marketed aggressively towards low-income communities, and particularly then through our street vendors. And you have touched on the fact that you want to have it labeled, or that it has to have a barcode that you can track it back. Is that the way you would address that, or do you have a wider plan to actually make the food environment of our hawkers also more healthy in the long run at an affordable price?
This is my wish. My wish is not to see people trading in the street. When it's raining, they can't do business. It's too hot outside. The stuff gets spoiled very quickly. My wish, and you will see in those inquiries of the Competition Commission, is to formalize. We say, government, support these people. If you go to other countries, the informal is attractive. Right, so they are in proper areas. The middle class here cannot support the informal. Right? They can't, but maybe there's value there. So even if I say to you label, it may say not expired, but the conditions under which that product is being kept, it's just gonna be very difficult to know what to do with the product. Just buy milk and put it out in the sun. Okay, just put it out. It's fresh, it's gonna expire in 10 days, whenever. Put it out there in the sun, let's see what happens. Are the trading conditions. So this is where, when you say formalize, we engage with the GTIC. They have that 500 million fund to support and uplift SMEs. My wish is for us to be able to buy freely. We should not be going to the big retailers all the time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that presentation, Commissioner. I have a few questions, and I hope Commissioner will be graceful, but I'm just asking also your responses be direct to help me manage my time. I want to start with the issue of pricing, because from the presentations we've had this morning, there are two related complaints relating to pricing of food. One is that food is too expensive. The poor cannot afford it. And linked to this is the issue of transparency around pricing. I know, and maybe to link that to the reports of the Competition Commission, where I think in two reports they find that that the prices are not linked to the production, meaning the production costs. Like basically the retailers are taking a far bigger share of, the price than actually the people who produce, meaning they cannot justify the increases based on the general increase in the production of food. So I'm just summarizing. In two issues that they've raised in their monitoring reports is the fact that when prices drop, consumers do not benefit from those pricing drops. So what I want to then, and I've noted your presentation to say that you do have the powers to determine fair pricing. So in that context, why is food still unaffordable? And the Competition Commission has told us that it's not unaffordable because the cost of producing the food is high. Yet your organization has not intervened to ensure that there are fair prices and it's to enable that poor people can afford food. So maybe if you can just comment. I'm assuming you've not done work because people are saying food is unaffordable. Maybe your response to that.
No, thank you. I think you are drawing me to this inquiry now, right? Because I chaired the fresh produce inquiry as an example.
Yes.
And the key issue that you look at, I'll generalize this, on pricing, you look at your cost structure. What are the costs that these businesses are facing? And the fresh produce inquiry finds that the model of the larger retailers is a high cost model. They have large distribution centers. They have massive stores. That comes at a cost. So the cost structure, it then leads to the kinds of outcomes you see. I give you about Eskom. Let's say Eskom has got debt, is it 500 billion? Their pricing must take into consideration that cost, the cost of debt. Then the prices will reflect that cost structure. So that's why we suggest that you should promote entry in different spaces. So there are some products that we import that are very sensitive to what's happening at a global level. But there are some spaces where we can participate, and what you need is some level of competition. I give you an example with the retail stores. We all think there's competition. Go to your local area. You're faced with two shops. They are not the same. Either this top end one or this bottom end one. There's no rivalry there. right? So we have been advocating for a competitive market structure out there. If you look, let's just say fresh produce, you know, we have produced a lot, this stuff in surplus. If you get your fresh produce markets to work, you should be able to channel, you know, products at a cheaper price. But I think with the structure we have.
Okay, maybe let me redirect you, Commissioner. I'm not referring to the fresh food inquiry. I'm referring to two monitoring reports of the Competition Commission. I don't know if you were here when we were engaging. They were telling us, no, they just produce the reports. They don't do anything about it. So what I'm trying to pick up, you are saying you do have the powers to do something about it. I'm trying to engage you on that. The first report is your the Competition Commission's 2023 report, where they found that retail prices for white and brown bread, for example, as well as maize meal, were higher rate than increases in producer prices. This is instances where you can see, I understand what you're saying, there may not be instances where there were specific findings. And also another monitoring report of the Competition Commission is the 2024, it's the 2025 Essential Food Price Monitoring Report. They say that the prices quickly rise when costs increase, but fall much slower when costs decline, allowing retailers to maintain wider profit margins at the expense of consumers. This is where there is some data you know, about unfairness. And also maybe the last report, where's the other report I was referring to? Is the 2021, sorry, it's also the Essential Food Price Monitoring Report, where there was a finding that, okay, no, this is regarding the leases. Okay, I think those are the two specific reports to say there's no correlation between the input costs and what retailers actually charge. And if that is indeed the case, and those are the, well, not findings, those are the observations made in this monitoring report, it is arguable then that the pricing is unfair of some products at the very least. And the question then is, if you do have the power to ensure that there is fairness in the pricing of food, which will increase accessibility of food for the poor, has your organization done anything about it? Or are you saying you're not aware of any unfairness? From where you're standing, the complaint about high food costs is just in the nature of things. There's nothing unfair about what we are seeing in the markets as you sit there today in terms of food pricing.
Yeah, it's a very important question you're asking, right? Is to what extent can you generalize?
Okay, yes.
Right? To what extent can you, when you see patterns, you then isolate this to that particular company? Each time these reports are released, the companies, sometimes they respond. You're starting with the COVID. Those reports started during COVID because it was very easy.
Yeah.
Ginger prices were just increasing, all of these. So those increases, you could see that there's a lot of exploitation here. But there is value in maybe probing into those areas. As I've said to you, we have prioritized expired things. I want to deal with that first. But there's nothing wrong to say, NCC, if you are picking up some margins out there, can you look into this, right? I think it's a fair question. I mean, there's nothing stopping us.
Yes, you have the power.
Exactly, so I'm saying there's nothing stopping us. The question is, when you intervene, you then have to isolate particular products. If it's bread,
Yes.
in your case, you can then study the cost structure of bread, what has been driving these prices. They come, they say Ukraine or something, so you need to still analyze. So I agree. I would not close that door.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Dule wants just to also hop on the thought trail. I'm going to allow her. Apologies, Acting Commissioner.
Thank you for this response, Acting Commissioner. Perhaps if we can ask it differently. In terms of Section 40, which regulates the issue of fairness and unfairness, is there a threshold or a criteria that is able to assist us in determining fairness or unreasonableness when it comes to pricing? Because I think that can also assist us in terms of this interaction between yourself and the evidence leader. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks, Commissioner. I think there could be a few things around prices. There could be increases, right? You see spikes at a point in time. Is this linked to any costs or anything like that? If you can establish that this is just some random increases, you can intervene, definitely. Right, so I'm not saying, I'm not saying that door is not.
Okay. The question, Commissioner, is a specific one. It's a yes or no. Do we have a criteria? We're not talking about a specific event, but a criteria that will guide you in assessing, you know, the prices, whether they are fair or not.
You could, there are two ways, right?
Okay.
So as I've said, I was talking about an increase as a benchmark. There are reasonable and unreasonable increases in prices. So if someone shoots up a price 15%, 20%, it causes you to zoom into that. So there is no, so the act, that's why I say it's very flexible. So it doesn't put a benchmark. So other countries, the US, they have this price gouging. You know, they've developed their case law that if prices they increase by 10%, but you're talking about a very low inflation environment, maybe at 1%, or there are many other things there. So the bar, if I were to ask you to be direct, it's very low. As I've said, nothing stops us. It's a matter of prioritization.
All right, before I move to the second follow-up, and I understand you're saying the Act itself does not have a criteria. Perhaps as an institution at a institutional level, have you developed a criteria for yourself on assessing the fairness or otherwise of food prices?
Oh yeah, that's a specific question. No.
You don't have, okay.
Yes, so we have not. So this is as I've said to you, we scan the environment, right? If something, I saw CFA increased something, 70%, right? They say jet fuel, right? That's the kind of stuff we could potentially look at. But you're asking about
so
food.
is this more discretionary? It's
It is,
for the commission to have a feeling about it almost, you know, and
It's not a
exercise
feeling.
is discretion.
It-
I mean, is it a discretion then that you exercise?
I find it a very empowering provision, this. I would not suggest that you start putting percentages, that if it's 10%, intervene. If it's less than 10%, then everybody pushes the price up to 9%. So we need to be allowed to look at something, right? Because I'm from the Competition Commission as well, I know the structures. I know that analyzing prices is not a small thing. As the Competition Commission cannot, how many excessive pricing cases do we have? It's a very difficult area to say the price of banana, it's unfair, right? I'll have to develop the benchmarks. And I agree with you. The law, you can reach a conclusion that we can use that more. I don't think there will be anything wrong with that, right? Because you have now zoomed into an issue. As the Human Rights Commission, you say, well, there is a concern here. The Commission has done a market monitoring thing. Because I also sit at the Competition Commission. I know they are using States SA data, so it's not company. So this data is from States SA, right? It's not company specific, so you could potentially zoom into a product. Yeah, so that part I don't think.
So I take it, is this then a commitment, Commissioner, that, because I take it is not an area we've been focusing on, then can we take it then as a commitment that the Consumer Protection will, Commission will be looking into this issue going forward?
As I've said, nothing stops us, right? It's a matter of choice. So if the Human Rights Commission says there's a blind spot here, NCC, right? Look at these issues much closely. We will do that, right? So there's nothing, because I prioritize say terms and conditions, because I can see the troubles, the people that come knock on my door with the real thing, but I'm not getting people knocking on our door saying the price of bread is too high.
That's what I accept that as a commitment, Commissioner, that complainants must also come lodge that complaint as well with yourself, so it is noted. The second issue related to the pricing is the issue of disclosures. The people who presented this morning complain about the lack of sufficient mechanisms to force companies to disclose their pricing structures, which then also leads to these unexplained spikes. And for the member of the public, because they don't know the cost structure, you know, even when they come to you to say is unfair, it's going to be difficult for them to say is unfair because there's lack of transparency around that. So does your organization have powers to enforce transparency in cost structures of companies, particularly in relation to food?
We have the power to investigate.
Okay.
Right? So which means we can zoom into a particular cost structure. Okay. I don't know whether because there must be some competition. Transparency, too much transparency between companies is what yield collusion. Okay. Because once company A knows too much about company B, they know that this company cannot go below price point X, right? So there's some transparency in the sense that we have the power. Not, as I've said, nothing stops us. So we have the power. So that part is very clear.
So in your view, then, the call that we have received from some of the stakeholders for this general food transparency in cost structure is undesirable for purposes of maintaining competition. To say that this data must just be publicly available is undesirable for purposes of maintaining competition.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a risk. So there has to be a lot of thought to that, you know. There's some level of transparency you need. You have transparency at the Joburg market, right? They are trading there. Some products are being traded. But you don't want companies to start sharing their cost structures. That now will be a recipe for disaster.
All right, I will now move to your submission relating to the ultra processed food and the regulation thereof. You indicated in your submissions that you do run education programs, and just to also clarify my understanding, they also include education programs specifically on ultra-processed foods, the dangers, the alternatives. Is that the kind of program you run as the Consumer Commission?
Our focus is on safety.
Okay.
Right, so we educate consumers about safety, product safety, generally, right? Not to say consume this or don't consume that. Just know what are the ingredients in whatever you are consuming. Know your product. So want an informed consumer more than anything else, who must be able to make an informed choice. But I'm not going to tell them, you know, eat this type of cheese, don't eat this type of cheese. But I will tell you, if the product doesn't have ingredients, it's not good for you, because you don't know what you're eating.
All right, so it doesn't, because another issue that was raised in the earlier submissions is this calorie-dense food that is not nutritious. And the submission was that it's also concentrated in, you know, poorer, so to speak, areas. So who then who should be providing that kind of information? Because we spoke a lot in the morning about stigmas that is also associated with eating food, and the status that attaches to people actually eating these ultra-processed foods that are not good for them. So who then must close that gap in terms of education, if you are saying your education programs do not extend to that level?
All right, thanks. The benchmarks are determined by the Department of Health for anything.
Yes.
So they're the ones who will tell us that, you know, products like these should be, you know, should have these kinds of levels of whatever measurement. But we don't have, if someone chooses to ban ultra-processed food, against a policy choice, right? It has to be made, but now you are getting into science to say, is this the cause of these outcomes, or is it other things like smoking,
yes,
excessive alcohol consumption, nyaope?
Yes, I get that you can't get into that space, but I wanted to know then who should close that gap, so that to promote informed choice, because without people being properly educated to say, yes, obviously it's not to educate, you can't tell people you can't eat this, you can't eat that. It ultimately is a person's choice, but there has to be education, you know, the impact of these kind of foods on your body and your health. So if you are not venturing into that type of educational program, in your view, which stakeholder should come in and close that gap?
I would say the Department of Health,
okay,
and the environmental health practitioners, because those are but the Department of Health is the most relevant stakeholder for this discussion.
Okay, I want to quickly move to the issue of food waste. There were submissions that we received. Commissioner, the way she's eyeing me, maybe let me stop.
I'm going to allow you to ask your last question. Or is it questions that have follow-up?
All of them, but I submit, you know, the witness is taking a lot of my time, Commissioner, so please also assist me.
Okay, I'm going to allow you the grace of finishing your set of questions, and then once you're done with your questions, then we will open up to the panel.
Thank you so much. The food waste, other presenters yesterday raised, you know, they attributed in part the large food waste we have in South Africa to the strict liability for retailers, producers of this food. So rather than making it available to other people, I think you really touched on it earlier a bit. They will rather destroy the food because they don't want to attract liabilities from you. And their argument is that really the food waste also does contribute significantly to food insecurity in South Africa. So I just wanted to get, I know you have very strong views about that, but is there some middle ground that can be reached in terms of food waste? Because we know, technically we are told even when it says expired, it doesn't mean it's harmful at that point. So is there middle ground that can be reached? Because I'm just putting the argument that was made yesterday about waste and the regulatory challenges that producers and retailers have in donating that food.
No, thank you.
Acting Commissioner, perhaps let me just guide this process. If you can ask the questions, and then in some aspects, Acting Commissioner, if you want to make supplementary submissions, it's open to that so that we don't delay, because I think you really want to go into depth in answering your questions. Okay.
Oh, I
The
must
chair
ask all of
says I
them.
can skip questions if I want.
It's not skip questions, it's that you can say I will
No,
make...
no, I'm
yes,
joking.
yes,
Chair.
yes, I know you're joking. I don't want the audience to mishear you.
No, what I was saying is, it's interesting, that's why I would direct you to the Department of Health.
Yes.
I've had a discussion with the minister, I think they're the IMC, they advised the minister, they are reviewing the regulation.
Oh, they are.
We have explained to them what we require to enforce the Consumer Protection Act. We require clear benchmarks. We require certainty on the dates. But if you do not want to protect consumers, then have subjective measures that today it's fresh, tomorrow it's not fresh. Now you're going to come to me and say, you have the Consumer Protection Act, you are not protecting us. And I'll start losing cases in court. Right, so this is a health, I would say the Department of Health, they are the ones that, in fact they are working on this right now.
Okay.
As we speak.
All right. And lastly, maybe from me, I will take up that conversation with the Department of Health. Is the issue around your powers? Do you feel or do you believe that your organization has sufficient powers to protect members of the public, particularly insofar as food security is concerned? But if there are some deficiencies that you believe may exist, what are those deficiencies that you believe may better will place you in a better position to protect the public insofar as food security is concerned?
Now, having worked now on this statute for the past 2 years, I will say this is probably one of our most potent instrument we have in terms of protecting consumers. Now, the challenge is that it has not been funded to the extent that it can reach its full potential. So you're asking me about prioritization. I have to look at the budget. I have to look at where I think I'll make the greatest impact with the budget that is there. So I would say those regulations I've said, I think we can do a lot with the regulations. There are a lot of things that we can do with this legislation. But the weakness, I think it's on them.
You can't operationalize it because of insufficiency of funds.
Well, I'm implementing it. And I'm implementing it to the best of my ability. That's why I said to you, I prioritize. I gave you 9 things, right? I say with what I have, I can do 9 things. And these are the things I'm going to focus on. But if you want more, if you want pricing, very complex and sophisticated things, then you need to load the allocation, and then this will happen.
Commissioner North, thank you. I will leave it there.
Commissioner Kunene, any questions?
Thank you so much, Chair. Got a few questions. The first one being, what kind of evidence would you say would be enough for the Commission to treat a price increase as unjustified and worthy of investigation? The second one is, does the Commission intend to develop formal guidelines or benchmarks for assessing excessive or unfair price increases? And how can consumers lodge complaints about pricing in a way that is useful for the regulatory action? Because from what you're saying is, for us, as Commissioner Makwasha usually says, these type of engagements are there to educate members of the public. So as you are there, Commissioner, it's an opportune time for you then to educate the public and say, in the event Pirimi is being sold at Marabastad, where do they go? And what is it that they should bring to you in terms of information? Because then half the time there's confusion of what the South African Human Rights Commission is supposed to do. There were complaints about children dying as a result of foodborne illness. And at the center of it, the Commission was put out there to say it is for the Commission to do something about this. But from what you've been saying, it is evident that this is within your mandate. So that is why I'm saying it's an opportune time for you, Commissioner, to at least educate members of the public, and we can only hope that they're listening out there and they can be able to learn from this. But if they don't, then I suppose they can always get a report at a later stage from us as the Commission to say, these are some of the things that we have found from yourselves. In relation to ultra-processed foods, is accurate labeling enough, or should there also be stronger rules on marketing and health warnings? And this question arises as a result of the fact that the issues about nutritious food. And we have already been told that the food that makes it to the shelves are the food that is the food that is not nutritious, and it is definitely available. So whilst, yes, we could be saying, yes, we're going to ensure that there's more work for SMEs in terms of creating labels and so forth, but then ultimately the issue is this: how do we make sure that the pricing in relation to the food, because it looks like we're dealing with a lot of things. We could be talking Ukraine just now, because of the wars. We could be talking droughts and again, when one comes back to us as a country, we are saying we've got fertile ground. Why are we not ensuring that we are producing the food ourselves? It's a story for another day, I suppose. But from where you're sitting, if you're able to assist us with the issues around rules for marketing and, of course, warnings. So it must not just be that I must be able to Google, Googling, that serial number, and that I might not even find, And again, this has been such an eye-opener, and thank you for this, because now we now know that that's how we can go. And Commissioner Makosha was just saying to me, I said, no, if I see SABS, I'm satisfied. She says, no, can't be sure. She says, you can't be sure. So, yeah, so Commissioner, if you can just deal with those, and I will leave it at that because I know she's not going to give me another opportunity. Thank you so much.
Is it okay, Chair? Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think the issue of prices, and you'll see the central bank plays a very, also the Reserve Bank plays a very important signal in the market. So it's saying we are looking at a very narrow inflation target at 3% with the tolerance band. Now this is where I say to you, if we put out benchmarks tomorrow, a 4% increase in South Africa may be unjustifiable because the workers will be getting a 3% increase. So if I put a benchmark, I say 5%, it's okay, 10%, it's okay. I think we should be taking, the cases as they come. And you're asking now, what can consumers do? Consumers are our eyes, right? So they interact all the time. It's a pity I can't lodge a complaint against myself, but there's a particular store, I go buy bananas. These bananas, they just increase by 10 rand, and then I'm very much curious. What's going on, right? But if it's consumers picking up those episodes of price increases, they must bring them to us. We have a very working system. We have an e-service. They can lodge their complaints there and file with us. So I'm very much, and I think because you are putting food, on the spotlight, you're right. When foodborne illnesses issues were coming up, we all needed to respond, right? So, but I think the spotlight you have put, I think is very important. The issue around health warnings, as I say, I would leave that to the Department of Health because that's beyond our mandate. So we just say, label, tell us where the product is coming from, what is the product description, now the choice is for the consumer, right? The consumer must decide whether that is what they want to consume or not. But the Minister of Health can say, as the Health Secretary in the US has been saying about other products, he's got his own views about many other products. So it's a policy question, right? What do you want South Africans to eat? Is it an NCC's decision? I don't think it's our decision. Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm hearing someone say, no Acha. That's the whole entire province of Limpopo protests, starting with me. I'm going to come to Commissioner Ntuli. Questions?
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner. It's quite clear from our interactions with you that we need a little bit more time. So perhaps let us start, Chair, by agreeing that we are certainly going to send you follow-up questions. We are going to convene as the panel and evidence leaders just to discuss if there are any other follow-up questions that we need to just place to you. So that's the first thing that we just need to acknowledge. And secondly, just to thank you for also taking the extra steps in addition to the responses that you would have submitted under Annexure A of the Minister's submission to also then ensure, once you would have received the letter, to make sure that before you appear, you file in your submissions, even if it was yesterday. We appreciate that and we acknowledge that. I do have some questions. I'm just going to put all of them to you. You don't have to respond to all of them now. You can do so as part of the supplementary responses. Just also so that we avoid a rushed response. I want to perhaps draw your attention to slide 15. Slide The question under slide 15 speaks to a focus on children. It's about marketing, labeling, and sale of ultra-processed foods, particularly to children. In your response, I didn't see anything related to children. Much of the response was focused on contamination of food. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to reconsider the question and assist us in understanding what it is that we had wanted to understand by putting the question to you. The focus on children becomes incredibly important. Now, we would also, in terms of this very question, we would also want to know whether the Commission plays any role in regulatory misleading in terms of nutritional marketing, especially to children. That would be very, very important for us. We received submissions earlier today around marketing focused to children, and we would be very interested to know what your role is in regulating this market. Similarly, are there any roles that you play in regulating health claims when products say they are low fat, or when products say they are healthy or immune boosting, for example, in this age of green economies? What role do you play in regulating those emerging markets? Then I'd like to draw you to also slide 19. There's a second part of that question which speaks to the how. How effective have these been in improving informed food choices? And we didn't see that coming out of your response. If you could perhaps, when you submit your supplementary responses, just give us examples of the hows. You've spoken a lot about education campaigns, awareness campaigns. We would love to hear examples of these. I'm struggling to remember or to recall interacting with any educational or marketing campaigns by the NCC. And I would be very interested to hear examples of these education and marketing campaigns and the communities in particular that they target, given your mandate and the focus that you have on low income and poorer communities. Now, in terms of slide 20, how does the NCC ensure low income household, rural communities, etc.? We equally would be interested to hear examples in your responses, just so that we can understand the practical implications of the interventions that you make. Are there any measurable impacts of the education campaigns? So once you've gone into a community and conducted an education campaign, do you go back to measure the impact of those campaigns? That would be the next question. I've already asked the question around the threshold in terms of the criteria. So one then would want to have a sense of your interface with the rural markets. What percentage of your complaints originate from rural communities versus urban communities? And equally, we would be interested to know issues around accessibility. Commissioner Quinana asked the question, and I'd like to just make an addition to that. How do communities in rural areas access the Consumer Commission, particularly those without internet? What are the mechanisms and systems through which they are able to access And I mean technological access, but also linguistic access. And then the last one, apologies, Chairperson. You mentioned some groups that you are currently in the process of accrediting in terms of Section 78. Are you able to give us a list in terms of number, but also in terms of the names of those you've already accredited? That would be very interesting to know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, how much time do I have?
You don't have to answer all the questions now, but I just want to just add this. I'm not going to ask my questions. I will rather that we write it as part of the written questions. We do that. I'm looking at time, and I know that some people have to drive to Pretoria, so I'm not going to ask my questions. You can ask those that Commissioner Nduli has asked if you're able to, and in those you'd like to make written submissions, please notify us, then we'll take it from there.
I would suggest, Chair, if that's fine, that all the questions you require, because when I respond, may not be doing justice, right, to the question. So you want examples. I'm not going to be able to give you each and every, instance. So I think if those questions are written down, as you have noted, Commissioner Ntuli, I had to improvise yesterday to make sure that when I come, I have something for you. Right, so I'm very happy to supplement, but maybe something to say to South Africans and this issue of access. We have a call center at the NCC, but it's a paid for. But during the foodborne illnesses, I engaged the mobile network operators. They zero rated the number. Right? I'll send you the statistics of the calls we got. At peak, it was 250. And that announcement was made by the president during the foodborne illnesses. The president or the team asked, how can people respond? We gave them the NCC number. We zero rated it with the mobile network operators. I'll send you the stats. You will see for yourself. I don't know. This is why I say to you, this issue is a little bit complex. I think the vulnerable, if I buy something stale, I'm most likely going to consume it. I'm not going to complain to the NCC. Right, so this is the nuance that I accept that the e-service, because it needs internet. But I have a call center. It's a small team, but they can take calls. They can help the consumer to log. But now they need airtime. It's not a free number. But I'm very happy to provide you with detailed information, with examples, so that you can have an appreciation, at least of full appreciation of what we've been doing over the years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acting Commissioner. You drove all the way from Limpopo. It's not an easy drive. And you were not just there for leisure, you were there working. So we need to note and appreciate that, as well as your colleague who was here since the morning. We noted her presence. Thank you so much. But you got us thinking. I think everyone was looking at their water bottle, seeing if it meets any type of standard. But as I correctly said, the illicit goods or the illicit trade industry has conflated and the real products. I know if you are in the liquor industry, they say now the alcohol, you get drunk for 3 days. So with that said, I'm not saying go purchase that Savannah that does not meet the standards. I'm saying thank you so much, Acting Commissioner. It is 6 o'clock. You kept the late night or mid-shift active. We will continue having engagements. With that, I release you from the podium, the witness podium. To the colleagues from the Human Rights Commission who stayed until 6 o'clock, thank you so much. To our evidence leaders, thank you so much. To those online who stayed with us until 6 o'clock as well, thank you. To my fellow panelists, thank you so much. You said to me, Chair, please give us strict timelines. And every time I looked at someone, someone's like, Chair. So next week we will look at the program and see how we ensure that we have proper engagements. With that said, the second day of the inquiry is adjourned. See you next week on the 16th of March at 8 o'clock sharp. Thank you.